IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's Monday, March 17th, Shaun, and you know what that means. That means my wife, my Italian wife, is way more excited about today than her Irish husband is because it is St. Patrick's Day. I had a gray shirt on with an IB logo on it. I had some green on, and she comes down and she's like, all right, which one do you want to wear? And I was like, the one I got on. She's like, no, you're wearing green. My wife never tells me what to wear. It's one day a year, March 17th, my wife tells me what to wear. But I'm ready to rock and roll, man. She goes, hey, how about gap closers? You're going to talk about recruiting. You're going to talk about the 27 kids. And so I was like, all right, she has the rundown of the show. Let's go. So I'm excited, Shaun. We are here back for another RTCF show. We're going to talk recruiting first, then team, then college football. And, dude, we are excited about this show because you and I have been talking about a lot of these topics for a while. And so what we're going to talk about today, the recruiting part, we're going to talk about the pot of gold that's gone out today. We're going to talk about just our overall thoughts on that. And then we're going to discuss how important the next 2 months are to Notre Dame's recruiting efforts for the next two recruiting cycles. And I believe this is going to determine whether or not Notre Dame can truly go out and have elite recruiting the next 2 years. Is not completely, but a lot of that groundwork is going to get laid in the next 2 months, and we'll explain why. That'll be the recruiting portion of the show. The team portion of the show, Shaun and I are going to talk about the quarterback battle. We're going to talk about the battle, size it up here going into the spring, kind of what our expectations are. But then we're going to take a little bit of a different angle to it, Shaun, because instead of just talking about the quarterback battle, which we've all talked about, we're going to look and say, what is this quarterback battle going to tell us about Notre Dame, and what's it going to tell us about Marcus Freeman? And we'll have that conversation. And then the college football part, you and I were on the phone, it was about a week or so ago, and we're going over the top 10 coaches list, top 25 coaches list, and we're just kind of picking it apart, and we're just like, dude, this is going to be our next RTCF show topic for college football. So what Shaun and I did is we put together our list of the top 10 coaches in college football. We have our criteria for it, and we just read off the list to each other, and we don't have the same 10. We don't have, outside of number 1 and number 10, I don't think we have anybody else in the same position. So that's going to be a fun discussion. We'll explain to you what our criteria is and then have some fun with it. And then we want to hear from you all too. Like, look, we want to hear what you guys think about some of these topics today, Shaun. And look, you guys are going to see Shaun doing a lot of this today. So obviously we're reaching out to a bunch of these 27 kids, and so Shaun's got a lot of these conversations going with a lot of them. He's putting the updates on them on the board at boards@irishbreakdown.com. I'm putting all the offers as we see them into one thread, so you can just kind of have a link to all those kids. And then Shaun has a thread going where he's just putting quotes from the kids about the offers. I think one young man told you that big 300-pounder from Texas, I believe, told you that Notre Dame was his dream school. So that's an interesting quote that Shaun. Did you put that one up yet, Shaun? Is that
no, I haven't. I haven't put that one up yet.
So that's quite a little teaser. So you guys are going to see who that is. So we'll have that out as well. So Mr. Davis, and I'm ready to rock and roll, man. Are you ready to get into these topics?
Just a little bit of a tease. The young man that said Notre Dame is his dream school, the big defensive tackle from Texas, he shares a first name with a player, big time player, that's currently on the roster. So if you go look at the offers, you might have an idea who that young man is. Go over to the boards. Just a little tease. We'll have his quotes coming up soon.
Well, what's interesting, Shaun, is we weren't sure if Notre Dame was going to do – we'll just kind of kick things off at the recruiting segment. We weren't sure if Notre Dame was going to do the pot of gold this year. I believe that was something that was kind of brought in. I believe Chad started that. That was kind of first implemented with Chad Bowden. I believe. I could be wrong on that. But usually in the past, we get kind of a heads up and we've kind of an idea of who's going to get offered and all these type of things. I got no word. The first thing I saw was Noah Grubbs tagged me in a tweet last night talking about, setting his graphic out. And so lo and behold, Notre Dame has gone out and continued to do the pot of gold. I obviously like the different graphics and the thing that all the coaches are putting out and the videos and the different things. But then the big part is the offers. And you get a good sense of who are the early targets that Notre Dame is going after in this class. And one thing that you and I are looking at as we're kind of going through this, Shaun, is first of all, there's still more offers to come out throughout the day. They kind of do this in waves. And the first early wave was loaded with defensive linemen. I had to text out Washington like, hey, man, I'm trying to get some work done today. Can y'all chill with all these D-line offers going out today? We'll see more receiver, O-line. I don't think I've seen any O-line offers go out just yet. None of the quarterback ones have gone out yet. Just a few running back ones. Not a lot of I think I haven't seen a single tight end one going out. So, like, those are all coming. So far, Shaun, it's been a heavy, heavy defensive offer so far. And the D-line especially has gone out. But the big thing we've noticed is there's a lot of really highly ranked and talented football players on this list. We've talked about this sort of in the 2026 class, people whining about where they are and recruiting. I'm like, well, part of it is because they're going after a lot of big fish, and big fish don't always commit this early, especially to Notre Dame. So that's obviously a big part of it. But then the other part of it is looking at it from the standpoint of, man, you've got all these changes and all this kind of stuff. And this is really the first really recruiting push we've seen from Mike Martin and Carter Allman and the recruiting staff. And it's impressive to see what they're doing because they still don't have a director of recruiting yet. And there's still two staff members that, high-level staff members in the recruiting office that need to get filled. So just an impressive list so far, Shaun. And I'm really interested about the heavy focus on front seven, especially D end and D tackle. There are a lot of D tackles that got offered today, including several 300-pounders and a lot of highly ranked guys. Like, I'm looking at this list, Shaun, that I put together. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 defensive ends that got offered. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 D tackles have been offered, including Richie Flanagan, the younger brother of James Flanagan, the incoming freshman for Notre Dame, and the son of Jim Flanagan, who was a starting defensive lineman, obviously, on that 1993 team. And I still say it's going to be wild to watch. You and I grew up, Shaun, same era. We're basically same age. We remember that 93 D-line very well. And to see Bryant Young and Jim Flanagan's kids now at Notre Dame, A, is pretty cool. B, makes me feel old. But, Richie Flanagan's a football player, man. And 25 offers that I've seen so far on the defensive line. Of what you and I have talked about is a really talented group of 26 board so far. Yeah. So you're seeing a point of emphasis here with this Notre Dame staff right now.
Just to jump in, as you spoke to, it seems like the skill position offers are just starting to roll out in the last 10 minutes. A couple of wide receivers, one in particular, the number one wide receiver in the 27 class out of Chicago. I was actually talking to him about coming up for Junior Day in January. He wasn't able to make it. Quentin Burrell, 4-star, Mount Carmel High School. Braden Jones, someone that's been offered from there. And Puma, the offensive tackle that's going to be visiting this spring in the 26th class, is also a Mount Carmel guy. So Notre Dame is connected, building relationships. Quentin Burrell, the number one wide receiver in the state of Illinois, class of 2027, just received his Notre Dame offer. He's super excited. I'll get his quotes up coming up throughout the day. But Notre Dame they're starting to release. They're doing it in waves based upon positions, it seems like. They went defensive line heavy. Now you're starting to see the wide receivers and running back offers come within the last 10 minutes.
They're going a little wild right now. It's like, hey, guys, we got a show to do. Can y'all chill out a little bit? We got a lot of work going on. But we're going to see this for the next several hours, guys. I mean, we're just going to see these coming in. And look, it's a great push. It gets a ton of action. You're seeing all these national analysts talking about Notre Dame offer, Notre Dame offer, Notre Dame offer, Notre Dame offer. You're seeing other top kids respond to it. We've talked about this in the past, Shaun. This stuff gets noticed. This stuff gets talked about. This is some people may not think these things matter. At the end of the day, is this the reason they get kids? No. Is it like that's the primary factor? No. Is it a part of the overall push to garner attention and to make your presence felt with recruits? Absolutely. Is it a great way to sort of say, hey, you're special, you're unique, you're someone we love? Yeah. And it's also can be a little bit of a detriment, as we've seen in the past, Shaun, where certain guys don't get offered on the pot of gold day, and they get in their feelings about that. But we've also seen plenty of pot of guys that don't get offered on pot of gold that end up still coming to Notre Dame. But this is a great push for Notre Dame, and you and I are going to be watching a lot of film tonight. And some of these kids we already know about, but a lot of these kids we're going to be getting into. Like Rivals #1 ranked linebacker Sam Spiegelman from Rivals just tweeted out Ellis McGaskin just got offered. He's their #1 ranked linebacker in the class.
Mm-hmm.
So as we've said, man, they're offering a lot of big-time kids in this class, Shaun. A lot of big-time kids in this class. And again, it's showing a change in focus for this Notre Dame staff. They're not just sitting back. A lot of North Carolina presence in this class, too. A lot of offers to North Carolina kids. A lot of Florida kids, obviously, as we know. A lot of Texas, a lot of California. So they're definitely hitting those big states early, Shaun, with a lot of those guys. And also another coach that's been very active today is Jawan Sider.
Yes.
We've seen a lot of running back offers go out today, including the kid that he had, Keemon Spell, who was committed to him at Penn, was committed to him at Penn State, still is a Penn State commit, but he's a guy that got offered by Notre Dame today. He hasn't tweeted that out yet. The local site that covers them put it out, but you know that kid's going to be a big target for Jawan Sider. But the other thing I noticed, too, is there's a lot of Northeastern flavor to his early offers at running back.
Yeah.
It's a very good year at running back in the Northeast. When you watch the film of some of these kids, you realize that it's not just regional, relationships, but these are some good football players on his board.
One of the things that sticks out from talking to these 27 kids early, it is very evident that the run to the national championship had an impact on how they view Notre Dame. Several of these 27 kids have mentioned, man, I can't believe I just got an offer from this school. Big time offer, man. Really appreciating the fact that they just made it to the national championship game has me really excited. So that has been a continuum in the conversations that I've had with these 27 kids. And I can't wait to get to the rest of this recruiting conversation, because I think what we're seeing, and I'm interested in seeing how you think about this. This kind of hit me this morning as I was going over the 27 class and looking at the upcoming visits from 26 kids with the departure of Chad Bowden and all the hubbub around that and the things that he's been saying. At times in life, when you go to a different season, you can't bring everyone with you. Now, this is just looking at a big picture, and I'm not saying anything about any particular individual when I say this. I want to clarify this. I'm just using it to start a conversation and expand upon it. Chad Bowden at USC is doing the same thing that he did at Notre Dame. Being aggressive, getting out, getting early commits. That's what you have to do when you have to go through a certain type of rebuild, per se, if you want to label what USC is going through as a program. Now
it is.
Yeah, that's fair, right? That's
7-6, 8-5 the last 2 years. That's not the standard. Yeah, that's a rebuild. Lost a lot of their roster. Yeah, absolutely. Fits
so Chad Bowden and what he does best. Well, once again, what he does best, not saying that he can't do other things, but what he does best absolutely fits the need for USC right now. Notre Dame is in transition. I said this recently. I don't think Notre Dame any longer. Notre Dame is going into a territory of being the hunter. The hunted. But in being the hunted, now you have to transition into being a hunter in recruiting. Right? So now you lurk. You don't necessarily jump out super early and hold on for dear life. Now you lurk. You do your evaluation, because now you have the on-field product that speaks. And now you can go after top kids in different regions that you might not necessarily have had to go after. And you have a different purpose. You were trying to build your roster. Now you're trying to elevate your roster and maintain the level of talent that you have established to make yourself a consistent national title contender. Building it and maintaining it are two totally different things. Notre Dame has transitioned from a recruiting standpoint to maintenance, not trying to get there. My question to you, Bryan, is what's the easier task, in your opinion, as a former coach and recruiter? Coming from behind and building to this point, or taking that next step of maintaining and winning?
Well, to me, it's not. I don't think Notre Dame's in a maintaining period. I think they're in that final push period. That's
Okay.
the hardest part. The hardest part is maintaining is the hardest. Once you get on top, now you and I both played King of the Mountain when we were kids, right? Once you get on top, that's the hard part because now everybody's coming at you. Where like when you're trying to become king, it's like y'all are to a degree for a while working together. Like, hey man, we all need to take him out, and then we can figure out who's going to be on top. Once you get on top, it's like you got no allies, man. Everybody's coming at you. And so maintaining is the hardest part. That's what Georgia's battling with right now. That's what Clemson had a tough time with after, the success they had. And then the second hardest part is that, and you could even argue this is the hardest part, is that final push. And that's where Notre Dame is right now, is that final push. They're not in a maintenance standpoint because before you get to maintenance, and I get what you're saying, like, I think we're saying the same thing. We're just using a different word to describe it. Is that final push is different than the build to get your roster to where it is now. And Notre Dame needed to do what Clemson's doing right now. Notre Dame needed to do what USC is doing right now. That was a strategy that needed to be implemented at the time. That was something that worked for Notre Dame. And now they're in the push where, look, they, like you said, they can sell things differently now because of the way the season went last year, because of the star power of Marcus Freeman and the proven track record. Mike Mickens is in a different animal right now as far as how he sells the product, because in the past, when he landed Benjamin Morrison and Christian Gray, and even to a degree Leonard Moore, but less so with Leonard Moore, it was selling a vision of what he was going to do. Now you talk to kids in the 26 and 27 class, they're like, well, look what Mike Mickens is doing. It's a proven. We're even seeing that a little bit with the D line right now, Shaun. You're seeing more and more guys looking at what Riley Mills did, looking at what Howard Cross did, and taking notice of that. We're seeing that at linebacker. So the vision is no longer as prominent in the pitches. Look what we've done, and that's huge to get some of those top level guys. And now, Mike, part of the team is still sort of in that building mode. Offense would be part of that, but I think the easiest part is and it's not easy, but of the three, the easier part is sort of the mass recruiting, where you got to identify, you've got to build. I mean, it's not easy, but it's a lot easier to go from 6-6 to 10-2 at a place like USC than it is to go from 10-2 to 12-0 and take that final jump, or from 10 wins, 10-2 to competing for a title. And that's where Notre Dame is now, is that stage of it. And USC is not there yet. Now, how quickly they can get there, obviously a place like USC can happen pretty quickly. Sark showed that at Texas, and Marcus Freeman showed that at Notre Dame, that you can get this thing turned around pretty quickly. So that's kind of where Notre Dame is right now, Shaun. And the question that now, and this is where we are kind of working over for these next 2 months, as we talk about recruiting for Notre Dame, these next 2 months are going to tell us a lot about how effective Notre Dame can be at this final push. Now, I would contend, Shaun, that this final push doesn't require the dramatic change in results that some fans think it does. What I think the dramatic change is more about the strategy and some of the focus and the size of the board. I don't think the overall, like I look at this last year's team, and I've said this when I was talking with somebody last night about this. You and I have talked about this. If Notre Dame has a normal year from an injury standpoint, I think that title game looks very different. Does Notre Dame win? I don't know, but I think it's a much different football game. I think they win if they're completely healthy and Ohio State's completely healthy. I think Riley Mills, Boubacar, Jordan Patelho, and Jason Onye have a much greater impact on Notre Dame than Seth McLaughlin and Josh Simmons do for Ohio State. You get Benjamin Morrison out there and Christian Gray and Leonard Moore, we're having a different conversation. I can't prove that. But if I'm going to say I believe that, I then can't say, but there's this big gap between where Notre Dame is and where they need to be. They just beat Georgia by 13. They just beat Penn State. They just played Ohio State, and we had the conversation that we just had. But they're not there yet. And so the next part is finding those missing pieces towards that final step. And that's where I think if you're going to talk about that, what are the final pieces, Shaun? The final pieces are some game changers maybe on the perimeter, but I think more so really elevating the one position that I think most importantly needs elevation in this 26 and 27 classes is D tackle. That is the one position above all others where there needs to be an elevation in what you're bringing in. And I'm totally fine finding projects like Armo Mukum and Sean Sevillano and some of those guys that need to be built up. Gordy Solstead in last year's class, that boomer bust type of player. But at some point in time, you got to try to find some guys that have higher floors and higher ceilings. And we're seeing that in the 26 class with some of these players that they're after. We're seeing that with the 27 offer list so far. Now, offers only mean you've offered. That doesn't even mean you're in the game. It just means you've offered. But as you've noticed and as you've said, the feedback from these early D tackle offers, Sean, when we were doing this 3 years ago, we get great feedback from receivers and quarterbacks and running backs and offensive linemen and linebackers and then eventually DBs. But we never got great feedback from a lot of the top D linemen. Just never did. It's different this offseason with the 26 and 27 kids in how they talk about Notre Dame. But that takes you here. The next step is getting them on campus. And for me, these next 2 months of March visits and April visits, who they get on campus is going to tell us a lot. And then also you're going to see kids committing this spring to summer visits, not just 26 kids, but 27 kids. Who agrees to come to Irish Invasion? Who agrees to come to the summer camps? Not so much because they got to prove themselves, but just to be there, put a workout in and show off their skills and that type of thing. That's being decided over these next 2 months. So the visits that will happen these next 2 months and the visit they can arrange for the summer, so there's that period of June, which is primarily a 26 focus. March, April, and May is a bit of a dead period. I don't think you can get kids on campus in May. March and April, when you have all those visits, huge for 26 and 27. June is a focus on 26, although they will bring in some top 27 kids. And then July, and also in June, you'll have the camps, and that's when the 27 focus will be on a lot of those camps. And then obviously, July is when you start to really find out how that went. So I think these next two periods, as we mentioned last week, this next 2 months is going to lay the foundation. So you talk about Al Washington in the D-line, talk about 25 plus offers going out today. Cool. Now these next 2 months are going to tell us, all right, that was great. You got all those offers. How many of these kids are going to come up to campus? You already have one D27 kid. Wasn't a Mississippi kid that's 6'2", 315 from Mississippi. That would be Devin Robertson, right? Isn't that the one that said he's already set up a visit to Notre Dame? He'll be on campus Friday.
Friday. They have a star-studded 27 group of players coming in this Friday. That's going to be a big day of spring visitors for the class of 27.
He ain't coming because he got offered today. That was already in the works. So you're seeing a lot of that, and I think that's a very important piece of this, Sean. In these next 2 months, in a lot of ways, they're going to tell us. Like so I'm not worried about where recruiting is right now. People complain, this looks like a Brian Kelly class. Just stop. You're just looking for something to be pissed about at this point in time. But if we're here in May 1st, then we're having a different conversation because it doesn't look like a Brian Kelly class. Brian Kelly's class is always loaded up early with kids but we didn't think they should get. That's not what this class is. So first of all, so your entire complaint is just flawed in its logic to begin with. But second of all, it's like the strategy is different, and you can't sit here and pretend like they didn't just go through a big coaching shakeup unless you're just looking to bitch about something. Like that's really the only reason that you can complain about that. However, there is, as we've discussed in the recent show, there is a reason to say, I'm not worried now, but if the next month and a half doesn't look different, then I'm going to get a little bit worried. But that's why I say wait till we get to March and April, because as you mentioned, Sean, there's some big-time kids coming on campus these next couple weeks. And it's not just 27 kids either. I mean, we look, Jonez Walton's coming on campus here in a couple weeks. We've talked about Messiah Mickens is going to be coming here at some point in time here pretty soon. I'm pulling up the visit list. Ebenezer Edewade and Akeni Agboku are both going to be coming here very soon. They're making unofficial visits here soon. Javion Osborne's going to be on campus this week. You've got the 27 quarterbacks going to be on campus this week. Braden Parks, a big-time 2027 D tackle, is going to be on campus. Cooper Witten, a 27 linebacker, safety kid. Jason Whitman's son, Witten's son, big-time player. Ian Premer, the stud tight end in the 26 class, is going to be on campus, I think, this weekend. Next week, you're going to have Malachi Ziegler on campus, who's a top 27 quarterback. Zach Fort, a Georgia commit in 26, is going to be visiting in late March. Jazeel Hart's a cornerback that you and I absolutely love on film, is coming in April. Jonas Walton is going to be on campus. Felix Ojo has an April campus visit set up. Elijah Golden has an April campus visit set up. So, like, the reality is like, look, they're in a good place to a degree. Now it's about, let's take that next step and get some of these guys on campus. One thing missing from these visits is that I would say is I am curious about is I don't see a lot of WR on these lists of visits for March and April. That's something that's the one spot where I'm saying, okay, let's see. That's going to tell us a lot. How many of those receivers get on campus these next 2 months is going to tell us a lot. But everywhere else, some big-time players coming on campus in March and June, Shaun. And that's why I say this next 2-month period, March and April, is going to be huge for Notre Dame to get in a position to close on the 26 class, but then lay an elite foundation on the 27 class.
Well,
which is where I think the title run will have an even greater effect, even so on the 26 class.
Yeah, and you talked about the stumbling block that was the transition period with Chad Bowden leaving a day before junior day, and eventually the elevation of Carter Allman and getting Mike Martin in and getting him situated. But I think, once again, they see the importance of this day, what it means. They own national recruiting for a day. No one else could say that. Notre Dame owns March 17th in recruiting. Everybody knows it. You don't see anybody really putting out offers or talking about offers that they've given out from other schools. I think Wisconsin snuck one in early this morning. But other than that, the brand speaks for itself. They own a day in national recruiting when it comes to those classes. You talked about Javon Osborne, who's going to be visiting. He received his pot of gold last year, at this same time. So it means something. It means something. It is just the start, like you said, and it leads to eventually when these young men become juniors, they get to campus for spring visits, and then they set up officials. And you talk about now the spring visit and getting people on campus. That's one thing that Notre Dame struggled with outside of some top dudes that they got in on early in their first couple of classes. When it got to that 25 class, you saw them struggle to get top talented kids on campus for visits. That's vitally important. If you're going to have any chance to get the official and eventually be in it to sign these kids in December, you have to get early visits. It means something. It impacts the parents, it impacts their coaches, and it also sets a tone for that young man to allow them to see how they're going to be coached. And now, speaking to the quarterback, any quarterback coming for, I believe they have 3 quarterbacks coming next week for the 27 class. Any quarterback that comes in, I think they have 1 visiting on the 19th and 2 coming in on the 21st. Any quarterback
and then there's another visiting next week.
Right.
So over the next week, you're going to have, I think, 4 big-time quarterbacks on campus in 27.
So they're watching a totally different offense this year. They're watching a quarterback battle. A true quarterback battle with 3 quarterbacks that can be efficient in the passing game, or so we believe they will be efficient in the passing game. So it's going to be interesting how these quarterbacks come away with looking at this offense, and I'll be very interested if we could talk with these young men and get like snippets or tidbits of what they see from the Notre Dame offense from their visits. It's going to be very important and very interesting to see, how things play out. But I think the visits are going to continue to build up. I think they were at 46 from like before today. Mm-hmm. The list that we have, I think it was 46 athletes committed to come in and visit, sprinkled in with 27 kids, but mainly 26 kids as well. That's big. If you could get a lot of kids coming in for the spring, that just catapults you into your summer. They have 2 camps, if I'm not mistaken. They're going to have 2 junior camps. Or just 2 camps in general, the 9th and the 23rd, I think, in June.
Of June, yeah.
Yes, so that's important as well, because that means you get more kids coming in that you can evaluate and look at. Notre Dame notices. This is what I love about Notre Dame under Marcus Freeman. You can sit here and all of the people that cover Notre Dame can ask questions, critique, say what Notre Dame needs to improve on. The fans can talk about it. Marcus Freeman, they know what they need to do. I have full confidence in every area, whether it's team related, recruiting related, administration. They know what they need to do. Whether or not they answer the question correctly, you have to wait and see. But they don't run from who they are and where they are. They literally are wherever their feet are planted as a program. And they deal with that and they answer those questions. And up to this point, they've answered enough questions over the previous 3 years to get them to a national championship. And as you said, B, the next step is going to be the most difficult step. We'll see if they've answered those requisite questions to get them to the national championship.
That's what we don't know. That's what we don't know, right? Like, and that's what I think these next 2 months are going to go a long way towards telling us. You know, you and I like the board that Al Washington's put together. I expect it to expand. I just put film in the board or in the chat of a 26D tackle I expect them to offer soon. Not a highly ranked kid. I like the film a lot. You know, there's a lot to like there, but it's going to be about the close, right? But to close, Shaun, you got to get to the point where you're in position to close. And I think that's where these next couple months are going to be super important. And now that your staff is largely like, look, they got a couple big important hires to make, but with Mike Martin in place, with the entire staff in place, with a guy like Carter Allman, and then of course there's a huge recruiting, operation there that is still intact. That is also, you know, like Becca Seitz and some of those other people that are in the back office that are working on these visits and things like that. That's still intact. So you should start to see some movement now with getting kids on campus, being able to close on some of these kids. And so that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. And that's what these next 2 months are going to be.
Let me just add, I would say at least 50% of the 27 kids that I've talked to have informed me that they have calls today to solidify their visits. They don't have a date set in stone, but they have calls that they're going to be taking later on today. I'm assuming after school, if they're not on spring break, that are going to solidify when they're going to be coming up to visit Notre Dame, whether it's in the spring or sometime during the summer.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very, very interesting. So, Shaun, that's going to be it for the recruiting part of the show today. It's like we're going to have a lot to talk about these next couple months, man. There's no doubt with visits coming up, a lot of visits that just happened. We were initially going to talk about the needs in the 26 class. We're going to kind of talk about that at a different time because, like I said, we weren't sure if the pot of gold was going to happen today. So when we came up with our schedule late last week, we were like, well, we'll just talk about this. But now that we've seen that go out, we changed it up a little bit. And again, I tell people, don't panic about where recruiting is right now. Let these next 2 months play out. If we're sitting there May 1st and we're having a lot of the same questions that we have now, then it's time to be concerned. And that's why I say these next 2 months, Shaun, are going to be huge, huge for Notre Dame. Very huge. So it's going to be a fun ride. There's no doubt about it, Shaun. I hope it's not a frustrating ride. I think that's the concern is because we don't know. We can say, hey, I got faith in Marcus Freeman or this guy. But look, the recruiting operation, they put a lot on Chad Bowden and his staff the last few years. I think too much. I think some coaches got way too complacent with letting just Chad do their job for them, right? I mean, the recruiting operation needs to do their job, but coaches need to do their job as well. And I think there were some coaches on staff that got a little bit too comfortable with Chad doing that. And then I think they got to the point where then Chad just kind of wanted to do that with everybody. And there's some coaches like, hold on a second. I know what I'm doing. I think that created some friction a little bit, but the reality is the coaches also need to step up their game a little bit too. So that's what I say is like, what is my concern? I don't see a lot of WRs on this visit list already. how that's changed in the next couple months is going to tell us a whole lot, so that's what I'm looking for. But you're seeing a lot of the June official visit list has a lot of defensive linemen on it. And that's going to be a crucial period as well for the staff and for Al Washington. You got to be able to close on some of those top guys. I don't care if you get Rodney Dunham or Ebenezer Edewade. You got to get one of them. You got to be able to close on a guy like a Tiki Hola. You got to be able to close on a guy like Mikael Blade. You got to be able to close on guys like Elijah Golden. Shaun, you said it to me before the show. This has a chance to be by far his best defensive line class. And it does. But we're a long way away from that being true, meaning it's landed. But the point is, your board is set up for it. Now the question is, can you close? That's going to be the big question of the next couple months, in my opinion, Shaun. And we don't know the answer to that. We don't know the answer to that yet.
And man, reference point. Let's use baseball. You can literally be successful 1/4 of the time in baseball, depending upon your power and your power stats, and be a Hall of Famer. That's just crazy. You can be successful 1/4 of the time as a hitter and be a Hall of Famer, right? Let's go to recruiting, right? This is why evaluation is so important. If you're a great evaluator, some people are just really good and charismatic and can close like crazy. They might not be great evaluators. They might just, I'm going to go grab whatever the rankings say about these kids. I'm not even really going to dig deep into the film and find the gems, right? What we're seeing is that Al Washington, and we can only base this upon the 26 offers and the 27 offers, his evaluation has shifted as the purpose of Notre Dame recruiting has shifted, right? And that, for me, I love people that are flexible, that understand the season that they're in and what they're doing.
Let me ask you something, though, Shaun.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something. Is that a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that the offer list looks different now than it did before the recruiting director GM change? You see what I'm kind of getting at here?
I see what you're saying.
Like, I think part of it was obviously looking at it from a standpoint of you had to build a certain way. And you needed to go out there and get some certain guys of a certain way because early on you weren't going to get the top guys. But my question to you is, we saw an immediate shift in the last 2 months on a defensive line board. Some guys that we thought Notre Dame was going to get that they kind of maybe didn't focus as much on as they did before, including one that's committed somewhere else. Yeah. We immediately saw a group of offers go out, what we also saw is some kids got immediately the push got, like Ebenezer Edewade.
Right.
Like pretty soon after the season, after Chad left, you saw Notre Dame start to push hard for him. Like you went from like 0 to 100 in like 3 seconds when that change happened. Why? Like, is it just a coincidence or not? So that's the thing, is like we're finding out is it that or that? We don't know the answer to that, but I have some questions about that. But the important thing is the board has changed. That's the important thing. And you have a mix of, and here's what the best boards are. And this is what you're getting to. And tell me if I'm reading you correctly. What you're saying is the best boards are that mix of, yeah, that guy's a dude, and yeah, that guy can be a dude, but he's a project. Those are you got to have both at Notre Dame, especially on the defensive line. And that, where in the past it was just the upside plays. It was always the upside plays.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing a little bit of both.
For me,
and that's key.
It is a recognition of Al Washington, where you looked at Al Washington initially when he got to Notre Dame. It was about going after guys that you have to add weight to go ahead and be interior players, right? And we talked about, whether you talk about Tyson Ford or Brendan Vernon, who were big ends in high school and used to playing outside, had to add that weight, how that impacts their development. That's an entirely different conversation. What I've seen in 26 and what I've seen in the 27 offers is these are our defensive tackles for the future of Notre Dame. 6'3", 6'4", 300 pounds. There's at least 4 to 5 offers of those guys in this 27 class. There's at least 2 to 3 that fit that mold that go from 280 to 300 in the 26 class. There is no more getting 250, 260 kids. Now we got to let them get up.
There is that, though.
There is that as well.
Only that.
It's not just only that. Now you have both instead of having, okay, a Davion Dixon, we got one guy. Sean Sevillano, he's the other guy for that class. 1 a year. No. Now he is recognized. Okay, but this is what if you're a true evaluator, it's not just about the recruitment. It's about evaluating your team and what needs to be done with your roster. And I think that run to the national championship and the experience of the national championship, what you talked about, they weren't healthy. And him as a defensive line coach probably feels like if I had my guys, that wouldn't have happened. We would have been able to do this. How do I solidify that?
Here's Shaun, look what they did against Georgia, though, without all those guys. Like that's the thing is like that's what. Just looking at that team, that's what I love about that team. They didn't have Riley. They didn't have Onye. But what I'm saying is they stepped up and played their butts off, is my point. It's like that's what I love about this team. It's not a comment especially about the defensive line, but it's what I love about the team. But the great D-lines can do that consistently. And you can't do it consistently when you don't have dudes. And by the time we got to round 2, their dudes were all kind of gone. Here's what we'll end with this, Shaun. We talk about the next 2 months is going to be huge for Notre Dame as a whole. And I'm going to say this. No coach on staff, except maybe Mike Brown, but I think it's way too early to go there with Mike Brown. He hasn't had a full cycle really yet. But because his 25 class is very similar to Mike Mickens' 21 class. 22 class, Mike Mickens went out and got Benjamin Morrison and Jaden Mickey. It was a little different animal, you know what I mean? And that's what the 26 class is for Mike Brown. So I'm in sort of I have some concerns, but let's see what he can do, especially if, about a couple of things go the right way. But no other coach as a whole has caught more crap as a recruiter, including from us at times, than Al Washington. From right now, March 17th, until the end of June, he has a chance to absolutely blow that up. Absolutely blow it up and be like, proverbially like Al Walsh has a chance to kind of look at us, guys that have criticized him in the past and fans who like to just bang on him for everything that doesn't go right and pretty much just give like double-barreled middle fingers. You know what I mean? Like, he has a chance to do that these next 3 months. Now, if he doesn't, then it's just going to the stuff is going to continue. But over these next few months, he has a chance to kind of put together a class that could make us say, like, look, man, do you take back what you said? No, I'll take back what I said in the past. So I'm going to focus on right now. Right now, dude's killing it. That's not saying it's going to happen, but that's what's in front of him for these next few months. And if he can close, even more so than Mike Brown, I think no coach has as much pressure on him, and no coach has great of an opportunity to impact the program over these next 2 to 4 months than Al Washington. Because if Notre Dame starts to turn around D-line recruiting, where it's not just the upside guys like Boubacar and Armel and even Chris Burgess, to agree, is a bit of a projectable kid because he's still pretty raw. The guys like that Logan Thomas is, the Bryce Youngs that are really talented, but they're kind of, there's a bigger gap between their floor and their ceiling than maybe there was for, Aaron Lynch and Stephon Tuitt and Khalid Kareem and guys like that. Like, if that changes and you're still getting the upside kids, but you're also getting some more of the high floor come in and play right now kids, that all of a sudden completely changes the direction of this Notre Dame football team.
And see, that's the one.
Go ahead.
No, that's the one thing, we talk about it all the time, as, people that talk about Notre Dame football, whether it's players, administration, or coaches, or just life in general, man. You got to be careful when you try to label people because you don't control the work that they do. You can sit here and say, well, who they are today, but if they're willing to put in the requisite work, they don't have to remain who they are today. So we can fairly look at Al Washington and say, I don't feel like he is the same evaluator and recruiter that he probably was 2 years ago. It was fair to criticize him, but I'm starting to see evidence from an evaluation standpoint that, you know what, he's evaluating himself. He's willing to be honest with himself about what needs to be, what to improve. And so if you want to stay with what was yesterday and don't want to open your eyes to see what could be possibly in the present and in the future, and that's on you. But objectively, you have to look at the offers that are going out in 27 and say, we haven't seen an offer list with these types, right? We haven't seen this type in multiples. We haven't seen this type in multiples. He's adding to his game, if you allow me to use that phrase from an athletic standpoint and apply it to Al Washington or any other coach. They come in with their strengths. They come in with their weaknesses. They work on their weaknesses to add to their game. Al Washington seems like he's putting in work to add to his game. You have to wait and see if the fruit comes from it.
That's it right there, right? But that's the opportunity.
It's up to him.
But you can't close on a board that doesn't have those dudes. Like last year,
exactly.
It was the cat from Indiana or bust at Viper, basically. I mean, Shanklin or bust, Damian Shanklin or bust. I mean that's not how you build a board. This year, it's like, okay, it's 3 guys. It's 3 guys here, 3 guys there, 4 guys there, and that's going to be the key to getting this thing done. So. But that's the opportunity that's in there in front of them, Shaun. And if they can close, it's going to be a lot of fun to see what that impact can do. Because like I got to tell you right now, Shaun, and it's really about D tackle. Because I'm sitting there looking at the depth chart on the defensive line, and I'm like, Josh Burnham, Bryce Young, Boubacar Traore, Logan Thomas Jr., and I'm thinking like, dude, I'm kind of fired up about what this edge group can be. It's really about, can the D tackle group take that jump? There's a lot of talent there, but there's a lot of unproven nature to that. And that's going to be the thing that makes or breaks his team. And that's also what's going to make or break defensive recruiting, is going to be D tackle recruiting. Because, like, look, for all the things we love about Mike Elston as a recruiter, his primary positive results were at D end. He didn't have a lot of success at D tackle. Matter of fact, the best D tackle that Notre Dame signed in the last decade was recruited by Harry Hiestand. Harry Hiestand recruited Jerry Tillery. He was going to play offensive line in Notre Dame. He didn't flip till late. He was a Harry recruit. So like that's still the position for the last 15. And you've had a guy here, a guy there, Tillery, Lewis Nix, but like it just has not been with any kind of consistency at all. And that's going to be the position that's going to make or break this Notre Dame team being a really, really, really kind of special group of guys, and that can, like you said, can close that final gap between them. Because like, here's my thing. You talk about the Georgia game. Where's Notre Dame as a team if they have D tackles like the guys that Georgia has? Where's Notre Dame as a team if they have, heck, even D tackles like Ohio State had? Although I still say if they didn't have injuries, they would have had D tackles like Ohio State had. But we talk about Georgia. What if Notre Dame's able to go get a Jalen Carter? Or develop a Jalen Carter? I don't even like Jalen Carter was a highly ranked recruit, but it can be that, or it can be a guy you develop. But what does Notre Dame's defense do? Like Riley Mills was a great college player, but we can sit here in all honesty and say there's a difference between how good Riley Mills was, who's a great player for Notre Dame this year, and what Jalen Carter was at Georgia. We can say there's a difference, and that's the thing is like, can they get those type of guys, or even close to it? What does this team look like? Who beats this football team based on what they're doing everywhere else? And that's what gets me excited about it. So and I'll say something else, guys. Notre Dame doesn't necessarily care about space eaters on defense. Like, that's not their style of play. They want to get bigger, but they want bigger guys that can move. They'll take some pluggers that will fill a role. Sean Sevillano fills a role. But they still want guys that can move because that's the defense that they play. Not that they wouldn't take a Jordan Davis, but that's not necessarily the goal. They'd rather have a Jalen Carter. You know what I mean? So that's where they're at.
Heck, get them both if you can.
Right. But the point is, Jordan Davis, you need to adjust your scheme to fit his style of play. And you do that if he wants to come, right? But my point is, Jalen Carter fits exactly into what you want and how you want to go at people. That's going to be the key. So Shaun, that's it for recruiting. We're going to get to some team stuff next, folks. But before we go, do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. We'd greatly appreciate that. And as always, best way to stay engaged in the conversation, best way to see the intel we got, best way to see the breakdowns that we're doing, and best way to just be a part of this community and support what we're doing at Irish Breakdown is to sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. For now, it's still $4.99 a month. $4.99 a month. It's $49.99 for a year. You can also join the booster clubs, where if you want to support us beyond that, you can join either the Shamrock Club, the Blue Club, or the Gold Club. If you sign up for the Shamrock or the Blue Club, you get a free IB Club mug. If you sign up for the Gold Club, you get a shirt that looks kind of like this, but it actually says, it has the IB here, but instead of having the words here, the words are below, and it says IB, and this says Gold Club. I don't own one of those shirts. My wife doesn't own one of those shirts. Shaun doesn't own one of those shirts. Nobody that works for Irish Breakdown owns those shirts. The only people on the planet that have IB Gold Club shirts are people that are actually in the IB Gold Club. I don't even have them. So that's what the special thing that's part of that is, just a thank you for your support for Irish Breakdown. So you can find all that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Shaun, we are now going to move on to our team topic because, man, quarterback, it's always an important topic, right? And it's always a hot topic. And I feel like sometimes it's like part of me doesn't even want to talk about the quarterbacks because it's so played out. Like that's all, like everybody's taking full advantage of the quarterback battle by talking about it ad nauseum so they can get those clicks up. You know what I mean? But the reality is it does need to be talked about. And so we're going to have plenty to say about it over the course of the spring. As we've said, I don't expect the battle to end by the end of the spring. I don't. I think this is going to carry into the fall. I know who I think's going to win it. You know who you think's going to win it. Other people that, but at the end of the day, we don't know who's going to win it. There's going to be a battle for it. It's Steve Angeli. I expect to start the spring as the number 1. I expect Kenny to be 2 and CJ to be 3. I think it's going to be a seniority thing to start spring practice, and that's how it should be when you're going into a battle. Because if you put Kenny or CJ number 1, then you're kind of like playing, you're kind of showing your hand a little bit, right? So I think that's what they'll start off with. How that continues throughout the spring, I expect there to be a lot more of all 3 playing with the 1s this spring, whereas last year Steve got most of the work with the 1s because he was the, sort of the ordained backup behind Riley Leonard because Riley was out last spring. CJ got a little bit of work with the 2s, but not a whole lot of work with the 1s. Not much. This spring, I expect it to be a lot different. I think we'll see all 3 of them getting a lot of work with the 1s. I think we'll see all 3 of them at times get work with the 3s. I think we'll see Blake Hebert at times get some work with the 3rd group throughout the spring as well. And the battle's going to rage. I mean, that's where we're at. And I mean, Shaun, anytime there's a quarterback battle, for me, it's a combination of I'm excited about it, but I also dread it because you just know the type of debates we're going to have. People get a little emotional about sports. I mean, we got a flipping governor of a state whose roads I just drove on that needs a lot of work and attention, threatening to sue the NCAA because his team didn't make the NCAA tournament. I'm like, y'all, we are losing our way right now. We are losing our way. But I love sports, and it's a hot topic, and that's great for us. But at the same time, it's just some of it just can be a little bit ugh. But the exciting part is also that this is going to have such a huge impact on this football team. As we saw last year, the starting quarterback was outstanding, and guess what? Notre Dame goes all the way to the title game. The year before, a little bit disappointing quarterback play. Team disappoints. Year before that, injury at quarterback, disappointing quarterback play, team disappoints. Year before that, a little up and down, but good enough for them to go 11-2. Notre Dame needs to be good at a lot of positions to compete for championship. Quarterback is one of them. And this next few months are going to tell us if they have a quarterback capable of getting this team back to the promised land, which is a chance to play for national championship.
I think for me, the things I'm going to be looking for is how things start to play out. We're going to reach out to recruits, look at it through their eyes. Very interested also in the opportunities and the connection between the quarterbacks and the wide receivers because of non-participants at the wide receiver position. I think there's a direct correlation to performance with the quarterbacks as well, and how both positions can impact one another when it comes to this race, right? Is a connection between CJ Carr and the people that came in with him in his class. Is it natural? Does it give him the ability to show his wares? It doesn't give them the ability to climb and make an impact during the spring, right? Steve Angeli pretty much has been here, the respect he has, the command of the offense. Does that show itself? And does he rise to the occasion? Malik Zaire told me something. He said, look, we know pretty much what Steve Angeli can do. Can he show the team that he has another gear? That is going to be something, because you have to elevate the team. It's not about your play. Do you have the ability with your play to elevate the team? You can say what you want to say about Riley Leonard and critique him all you want to. He had something that when it was needed, he could elevate the team. Marcus Freeman, I believe, is going to be using that blueprint, knowing that he just ran the gambit. He knows what's going to be needed throughout a long season to get back there and to eventually hoist the trophy. So now, which guy I'm watching to find which guy can show me in different situations that he can elevate from his play, or either his mind, his knowledge, pre-snap, post-snap, off-script, everything. Can you
those go together?
The team. Yes.
The mental and the physical goes together.
Yeah. Because some people might look at Steve Angeli physically in comparison to the others and say, well, there's no way he can elevate the team. Hey, that's why you have things that are off the script of physical. They're called intangibles. Like, can he show that he has the intangibles to be able to allow him to do that? The other quarterbacks with giftings probably have the physical giftings to be able to do that in certain ways a little bit more. I think it's going to be very intriguing. You said, I don't have a favorite. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't have a favorite. I don't, like, right now, if you ask me today, who do I think? I'll be like, yo, I can literally see a path for all three. I literally don't know. If you ask me to guess, I would probably say a particular person just based upon all of the criteria. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I think it puts Marcus Freeman in these are problems that you want to have as a head coach. Yes. Outside of just knowing who your guy is, talent or elevated talent in the room that is diverse is a really good position. And I think this is going to tell us a lot about Marcus Freeman, because I think this is the first time where either he has not had to go to the portal to find somebody because he does not believe necessarily in what he has in the room. This is where this head coach believes in his room, right, and believes in all three guys in a different way. And now he gets to evaluate that from a place of, I believe. That is very different. So I'm going to be very interested in how he conveys it when he meets with the media during the spring, and then how it goes about into the fall as well. It's going to be him. It's going to be a reflection of Marcus Freeman as a head coach, because he's been criticized. And a lot of people said, well, man, he plays it close to the vest. He plays to the defense. He doesn't want to open up the offense. I don't think that is –
at times that was true.
Yeah, but I think he is looking at – and this is his evaluation. He's looking at whether or not whether or not he trusts what's in the room. I think now he's in a place where he trusts not only the room, I think he trusts the offensive coordinator. I think he has a lot more trust offensively than he's had going into any other spring. Yeah. At the core, he's always going to be a defense first guy. We don't run away from that. That's a fact. But does he have a willingness, because he has more trust in the staff, quarterback, and the talent on offense and the offensive line. Let's mention that as well. I think he has a lot more belief in this offensive line and what they can be in protecting the quarterback in comparison to last year, even before Charles Jackson got injured, because he lost. What he lost was significant. That was significant.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it puts him in a place to now not have to worry as much and just really now sit back and evaluate a lot of things more directly. I think he'll spend a lot more time with the offense in this offseason.
I don't.
I think he has to because of the quarterback position. I don't think I think he has to have his eyes on the small things, unless we're just sitting here saying, oh, well, he just knows who he wants to be the guy.
I think early in spring practice, he's going to be more with the defense because you're installing something new. You talk about trust a lot. I don't know that there's a coach on the staff more he trusts than Mike Denbrock, outside of maybe Mike Mickens, from a coaching your position standpoint. I think when you're installing, if Al Golden was still D coordinator, I'd agree with you on that, Shaun. I think he'll have spent some time at the quarterback room. But I think when it comes to some of those type of things, I think that's where early in the spring you rely on your coaching staff to kind of push those things. And that's where a lot of your player meetings and things like that come up. But I think we'll still see him with the defense a lot early. Now, when we get to fall, if they haven't truly decided on a quarterback, then I think that's when you start to see him shift his focus more. I understand the premise you're saying. I think I would agree with you if we weren't in a complete coaching change at the defensive coordinator position this spring. But what we have seen, though, Shaun, to your point, is it's a shift in era at Notre Dame, where come before this season, 3 of the last 4 starting quarterbacks were portal pickups. Yeah, Jack Cohn and 21. You had Sam Hartman in 23, and then of course Riley Leonard in 24. Now Marcus Freeman wasn't responsible for the first portal pickup. That was Brian Kelly who went out and got Jack Cohn, who I love that pickup and still love what Jack did at Notre Dame. And they needed to go to the portal in those years. And I would have wished they wouldn't have in 23. And the reason I say I wish they wouldn't have in 23, because I wish we weren't in a situation where Tyler Buchner lost almost another full year because of injuries. You had to go to the portal in 23 when Tyler suffered yet another season-ending injury that cost him a lot of development time. And you didn't have depth behind him. You had to do that. Tyler wasn't a guy that you could look at and say, for sure, we can count on you to be our starting quarterback for 14 games next season. I understand that. As disappointing as it was, I understood that. But I don't know if you go get Riley Leonard and Sam Hartman, though, if you're someone who is so focused on protecting the ball, things like that, just as an overall theory, I don't know that those two guys, especially Sam Hartman, who was a bit of an interception guy at Wake Forest, and Riley Mills is an off-script playmaker type. I think we saw that early with Marcus Freeman last year. And I think this is where a lot of people get some of their concern about that. And is early last year, a lot of things he said were frustrating about the conservative nature. Looking back, here's the answer we don't know. Was that because that's who he is? And then and that just he had to change it because of the loss, and you can't win if you don't? Or is that what he felt they needed to be because Riley wasn't ready to take full charge of the offense yet because of the time missed of the injury? Because what we saw coming out of the break was a different type of Notre Dame offense, and one where, yeah, they didn't turn the ball over a lot. But, I mean, look, a turnover, yes, a turnover is an interception and a fumble, but you know what else is a turnover? Going for it on 4th down at your own 35-yard line. They went for it on 4th down twice in their own territory against Texas A&M. Got the first one, didn't get the second one. Like there were some mixed signals from Marcus Freeman early last season. But I think overall the aggressiveness to situational aggressiveness never went away. And that's what leads me to believe you don't go get Sam Hartman. You don't go, I mean, you think about things that he had said about Tyler Buchner, and you just watch how he engaged with Tyler Buchner in the bowl game in 2022. Kid threw 3 freaking picks, 2 pick sixes. And you know, like, that's a little too much in one direction. That is turning the ball over too much. But I don't think this is the same era of you're so afraid of turning it over that you then handicap yourself in certain. That's what we're going to learn about Marcus Freeman. But I don't think he's that guy. Is as a defensive coach, you always value turnovers because you know how important it is, because you know how much you preach getting a turnover and what that meant for your football team. But nobody wants to turn the ball over. I mean, look at Oregon. I mean, they're a very aggressive team. They don't turn the ball over a whole lot, at least not when they're good. I mean, how many interceptions did Dylan Gabriel and Bo Nix throw the last 2 years? I mean, Gabriel threw 447 passes through 6 picks. Bo Nix the year before threw 470 passes and 3 picks, and 490 year before that and 7 picks. Like, they haven't thrown a lot of. They don't turn the ball over a ton, and yet they're still aggressive. And that's I think a challenge for a lot of defensive coaches. Is no, you don't want to turn the ball over. No coach wants to turn the ball over. Dabo didn't love that Deshaun Watson threw 17 picks in 2016. He just learned to live with it because he knew what came with that. But there's being so afraid of it that you paralyze yourself or you handicap yourself. That's where I think a lot of people are at with the whole why some people think he will choose Steve Angeli because of that. And it's certainly possible. I just don't think that's the case. And I think even if he felt that early last year, I think what he saw about his team's rise made him realize that he can't be that way if they're going to win a title. And you have to be willing to be aggressive and go on the attack. Thank you. And be that kind of quarterback, have that kind of playmaker quarterback. I think that that is important to him. But you look at the way they recruited 2 young quarterbacks that also didn't turn the ball over a whole lot. And CJ Carr starting at quarterback or Kenny Minchie starting at quarterback doesn't mean they're going to be 15 interception guys the next 2 years. It just means there's going to be a growing period like there was with Riley in 2024 in September. You've got to manage the offense in a way. So, like, if anything, the way he led the offense in 24 makes me think that he would be more willing to go with a younger player early, knowing we can protect him with run game and defense until he figures it out. That's what we saw last year. And so, but if I'm wrong and he goes the opposite direction, which is a very fair thing for people to say, because we really don't know. We haven't been in this situation with Marcus Freeman where there's been Marcus Freeman. They haven't had a real quarterback competition since 2018. Can we be honest about that? I mean, and I don't even know that was really much of a quarterback competition, because you and I both know, Shaun, it was Brandon was going to start against Michigan. And then after that, at some point, Ian was going to take over. I mean, that was just kind of where we thought they were going to go. You could even argue that was more of a quarterback competition, I think, than 2016. I think 2016 was the most rigged quarterback battle that Notre Dame has had in a long time. We've talked about that as well. It's been a long time since Notre Dame's had a real quarterback battle. This is the first real quarterback battle of Marcus Freeman's tenure. So a lot of this, I'm guessing, people that think he's going to go with Steve Angeli are guessing. And we're all guessing because we don't know what he's actually going to do in this type of situation. And it's just why I think this is such an important era, and why we say, Shaun, we're going to learn a lot about Marcus Freeman by this decision. And I think that there's a thought that, you start Steve early and you get through those first 2 games and then you go to the younger guy later. And I'm like, that might have made sense in the 4-team playoff era or the BCS era, where sometimes you could not afford to lose a game. You lost to freaking Northern Illinois at home last year in week 2 and made the playoffs. You can sustain a loss to Miami or Texas A&M and still make the playoffs if it means getting that other guy better. If you start Steve in game 1, it's because he proved that he's your best quarterback, not because he's going to get you through the first couple games. It's because you think this season he's your guy. And if he proves not to be, then you can go to somebody else. But if you start Steve Angeli because of experience or whatever else, then that makes me question, do you really have sort of the conviction to trust the evaluations you and your staff made about the quarterbacks on your roster? Do you have that conviction or not? Are you willing to maybe live with youthful mistakes, knowing the payoff is going to be huge? Or are you going to go with what you think is easier? Like that's really the battle here, Shaun. And again, I'm not saying that the only way Steve starts is if you go that direction. If Steve literally outplays the other two quarterbacks, that's the case. I'm working with the premise that some out there have that he will pick Steve even if Steve isn't the best guy because he's afraid of this or that. The other thing, too, is Steve Angeli hasn't exactly been a non-turnover guy in his career on the field. I mean, he fumbled a ball against Penn State. He threw a bad pick last year against Stanford, had another ball against Oregon State that should have been picked off, fumbled the ball against Oregon State, and has turned the ball over in the Jersey scrimmage last year. So I don't think that if Steve wins the job because he wins the job, different story. We're working with the premise that some have that he's only going to win the job because of insert excuse for why he's not the best guy, but the safe guy. Is that a fair, and that's not a criticism of people making that point of view, because I think that's a fair thing to talk about because we don't know. When I say I don't agree that that's going to be the case, I'm guessing. When you say you do think that's going to be the case, you're guessing. Not you, Shaun, just in general. We don't know. But if the assumption is that that's why Steve starts, and that's what we think is the case, if that were to happen in this situation, that would concern me about. It would raise some concerns about, does Marcus Freeman really have the willingness to do what it takes on the side of the ball that he doesn't feel he can control as much because of his background, that maybe he would. I mean, because we've seen them play a ton of young guys on defense the last couple of years. Ton. I mean, Notre Dame's had a freshman All-American at corner in 2 of the last 3 years. And would have had one in 2023 if Christian Gray got more opportunities, because he was pretty good when he got a chance to play.
Yeah.
So that's the thing is, go ahead, Shaun.
No, I think it's going to be very interesting. Also, where does he believe his team is now? What does he believe? You talk about the trust factor, not only in the coaches, but the talent. It's going to be very important to me how he evolves and continues to, because we have seen Marcus Freeman evolve, which is why when we get to the later conversation about the top 10 coaches, you know, he just might be in there because we've seen him get better under the current constant microscope. Being the head coach of Notre Dame is a constant microscope. You don't get a breather. There is no breather. It is
sitting on the
it
sideline at a basketball game will get you critiqued one way or the other. This is awesome, or why isn't he out there making recruiting calls? Like literally sitting in the half court or court side of a Notre Dame women's basketball game with your kids will get you critiqued, positively or negatively. Like that is the spotlight that he lives under. There's no doubt about that.
And so I think that's also going to be something. What does it speak about how he has evolved as a head coach? Like, what does he look? He said last year, I believe, we're the offense that we need to be. We're not the offense that I eventually want to be. And people just thought he was lying. Like, oh, no, I don't believe. It's like, look, take the man for his word and let it play out. And this, in my opinion, is the greatest opportunity for him to back up what he said. Okay, this is what you said. This is the greatest. This is the best opportunity right now to show, hey, I've evolved. And I feel like we're ready to be the offense that I envisioned at Notre Dame.
It may not even be evolved, Shaun, because what you just said is what? He said, when did he say this? He said this a couple times. But when did you're talking about this past year, right? My point is,
I want to say it was the first time he said it was
before his first season.
Sam Hart, yeah. And then he reiterated it again. I want to say in between last year, Sam Hartman leaving. Yeah.
Yes. My point is this: is it's not even an evolution. This is the plan, and we can't execute that plan until we get the right guys in place. And that's exactly to your point. That's why this is such a big opportunity for Marcus Freeman and a big learning lesson for us of learning about Marcus Freeman. Because this segment is not meant to criticize people that are saying he's going to start Steve Angeli for insert X reasons. It's not at all. It's simply to say, because none of us know, it's simply to say we don't truly know. We have our opinions, and we can debate those and go back and forth on those. But if anybody tries to tell you they know what Marcus Freeman's going to do because of insert reason, they don't, because we've never been in this situation before. They're guessing. It may be an educated guess, but they're guessing. Just like I'm guessing that he won't do that. But we're going to have an answer for sure here by the end of August. And that's where I think this spring period is going to be important, Shaun, because do you allow a real competition, or is it going to be a rigged competition? Like there was one thing that Coach Freeman said last year and about CJ Carr, about how well CJ played, but his pushback was, yeah, but he was going against the threes. And I'm like, well, whose fault is that? You know what I mean? Like it's not like CJ walked in and was like, okay, who wants to go for threes? He go, not it. You know what I mean? It's like, and he lost that not it battle, or he rock, paper, scissoring. Or read CJ Walker's like, hey, coach, man, I really want to hang out with the threes this spring. I don't really want to actually bat. I mean, whose fault is that he only played with the threes? And that's going to be the interesting part of how this spring plays out, is how do they create an even battle? That's going to be a very interesting aspect to this. So there's almost a little bit of nervousness for me, Shaun, with this. Because I'll explain why.
Really?
I love that reaction. Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because you know what I realized as we're having this conversation, and you and I were having this conversation? It was, I haven't completely gotten rid of all my BK PTSD. Because it's like you're on the cusp. You're so close to getting the program where we think you're ready to take the next step. And we were there with Brian Kelly multiple times. After 2012, hey, you're on the cusp, build on this. After 2015, you're on the cusp, take that next step. After 2018, you're on the cusp, take that next step. And in every instance, he did something stupid that kept the program from being where it should have been. And either before or after that season. And there was always like, you just got to the point later, it was like, you just kind of knew that if a hard decision had to be made, he was going to make the easy one. Marcus Freeman's motto is choose hard. And so there's obviously, but mottos don't mean a whole lot till you're put in a hard situation, and then you actually got to live it out, right? It's easy to put a slogan together until you're in that. Every team in the country, including 0-10 teams, has slogans. Everybody's got, Florida State had a slogan last year. Doesn't mean it meant anything. You know what I mean? It's, can you live that out? And that's going to be the question, is can they live that out? And this is kind of that final piece for me, because it is the unknown. It's the thing that we haven't seen before. We haven't seen him have to make this kind of decision, or allow his staff to make this kind of decision. And like, what if he has a staff that's afraid to put a guy out there that might make some mistakes? Like, and this is a pure hypothetical. So I'm going to mention Gino Guidugli. I'm not saying that Gino is doing this. He's the quarterback's coach. But like, what if Gino Guidugli is say has a big say on who's going to start, and he wants to go with someone that he feels is safer? I don't think Steve Angeli is the only safe choice. I think you can make a case that CJ Carr is a safe choice. I wouldn't agree with that, but I think there's a case you can, most talented, smartest, but let's say he wants to go with the safe choice. And let's say we all believe that Steve's that safe choice, since that's what's being discussed with people. Steve's the safe choice. Does Marcus Freeman have the conviction to say, okay, I hear you, I appreciate that, but no, we're not going that way. We're going to go this way because of this. Like, that's a big, like, you may not do that at strong side end or slot receiver or free safety. You're going to let Mike Mickens, who you want to start? All right, cool. Tell me why. All right, cool. Go for it. Hey, Max Bulla, why do you think so-and-so should start at will linebacker next to Drake Bowen? All right, cool. Let's get her done. Quarterback's a different animal. He knows that. It's very clear that Marcus Freeman understands that that's a different animal. Does he have the conviction to do it in that case? Like, there's so many things that go into this, Shaun, that we're going to learn. As we said, we're going to learn a lot about, but I still just deep down, I'm a little nervous, because what if he makes the wrong choice? What does that say about the future of the program? What hope does that give you and I? And I'm asking this question generally because I know how I feel. But what hope does that give you and I that he will then eventually be the guy that can take this team to that promised land, when he's not even willing, in this tremendous opportunity with the schedule they have in front of them that's so front-loaded that you could have a younger quarterback get some tough lessons, knowing that he's going to have the whole season to get better and better and better, and then be much more prepared for the postseason. 12-team playoff and so many things that are different than what were true during the Brian Kelly era. Is like, if he's not willing to make that now, what hope is there that he's going to be able to do the things that are needed to take the program? Like that's my deep internal fear. If the decision he makes is wrong, well, what makes it a wrong decision? The season plays out how you think it should play out. If he starts Steve Angeli because Steve Angeli wins the job and Steve leads Notre Dame to the promised land, phenomenal. It's not about who he picks. It's about why he picks who he picks. That's what it comes down to. That's why we're not using specifics as much, but we all know who people think is the safe pick. And that's why I mentioned Steve in that scenario. But as I've said before, I think it's a little bit unfair to Steve to just assume that's the only way he's going to win the starting job is because of that. I don't think he's going to win the starting job if it's an open competition, but he could prove me wrong. It's more of, that's my fear, Shaun, is if he makes the wrong decision for the wrong reasons, it makes me wonder, does he have what it takes to kind of take that next step as a coach? That's my fear.
You said something. I'm going to put the onus on making the decision for, can these quarterbacks make the decision for Marcus Freeman? Like, does someone make it so obvious in the spring and in the fall that it's like, okay, it speaks for itself. There's really no decision for me to make. These young men have decided. They have decided it. I want all of them to ball out and make it a tough choice. I don't want it to be somebody, this kid played bad, that kid played bad. There's a history of Notre Dame. You probably can pull up the names. There's a history of Notre Dame where guys that actually led Notre Dame to very promising or very successful seasons going into the spring weren't the starting quarterback.
Yeah.
Like Lou Holtz was going to start someone else and then fake intervene, whether it was with injury or something else. And then
Ron
you get
Paulus
a Kevin
in 93 was going to start.
Yes.
You had Tommy Rees was supposed to start in 2012, but then his off-field situation resulted in Everett getting that opportunity.
Yeah.
2018, when they went 12-0, Ian Book wasn't even the starting quarterback at the beginning of the season. So there have been a lot of years where the guy that people thought was going to be the quarterback ended up not being the quarterback, and the team turned out to be pretty flipping good. That's certainly
and by no man, I take time right now.
Leaving them to the Fiesta Bowl.
That was a crazy
was like
season.
The third best quarterback in his class that signed with Notre Dame. But yes, exactly. Yep.
And I'm not putting the whammy. No whammies. I'm going to say no whammies because I'm not putting the injury whammy on this battle. But I'm just mentioning there are a lot of different ways where, coming into the spring, you might feel like it's going to be a particular person. And then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, it changes and it ends up being a successful season for Notre Dame. That's happened plenty of times. So I think Marcus Freeman is sitting pretty. I think he's pretty happy with the talent throughout this roster. Despite non-participants, I think he's going to be looking at a pretty talented team go through practices starting this week. And so the quarterback being the spearhead of that thing, I think it's going to tell us a lot about this program, where it stands, where it's headed, where this offense is headed, and what the head coach is thinking about the program.
Yeah, I agree with that, Shaun. You get my nervousness, though. I mean, is that a fair thing to say?
Anytime it's unknown.
Let me just say this. Not the unknown. The nervousness is not the unknown, but the nervousness is the what if. What if he makes the wrong decision for the wrong reasons? What does that say about his ability to be that championship quarterback, right? I mean, because we've seen a lot of coaches that have won titles have had to make those tough decisions. I mean, who was the starter for Georgia when the 2021 season started? It wasn't Stetson Bennett. It was I'm drawing a complete blank now. It was the JT Daniels. Yeah. Who you had to bench a kid in Kelly Bryant that led you to the college football playoffs and the number 1 seed to play a true freshman. Now, it was a talented true freshman, but there's a lot of coaches that don't have the balls to make that kind of decision. I mean, look, Alabama benching Jalen Hurts, who got you the title game 2 straight years because he wasn't playing well, and putting a true freshman in the game to go out there and win that second half. Like, you got to be willing to make those tough decisions sometimes.
That same year, Kirby thought he had a returning starter in Jacob Eason that gets injured, and now here comes Jake Fromm, and Jake Fromm never gave the reins back. Led them to a national championship game as a true freshman. Like, this is, so having 3 guys that can do it, I understand the nervousness, right? But, I guess I don't feel the nervousness because it's not my decision. It's like, I would be super nervous if it was my decision.
That's not what I'm referring to. What I'm referring to is more of the nervousness of what it tells us and sort of I don't want to live in that world again that we lived in for so long, where there just was never that hope. Even when you convince yourself to have hope, ultimately deep down, you knew there was no hope, that they were going to, you just knew Brian Kelly's going to do something that's going to keep this team from reaching its full potential. What was so exciting about this last season and what we've seen Notre Dame do is that there just seems to be a little, for me, more hope that you have a coach that is willing and able to make the moves necessary. Like last year, Shaun, to how you go from losing to freaking Northern Illinois in a game where they outplayed you for 60 minutes. It wasn't fluky. They kicked your butt for 60 minutes to the national. That team then goes to win the national, and not only plays for the national title, but destroyed people all the way through until the semifinals. And then say, well, man, how's this team going to handle playing from behind? They haven't played from behind. Even the USC game, it was a competitive game. They never trailed, not for a second in that game. Did they trail in that football game? And it's just like they hadn't trailed in the football game at halftime or later since September 6th against Northern Illinois. How are they going to handle playing coming from behind? Well, we found out in the semifinals they were down 10-0, and we're getting thoroughly outplayed by Penn State. And no panic. All the right buttons got pushed. Team comes out second half, and you just knew after that first drive, all right. How many times do we see Notre Dame, we felt good going into halftime, and then the second half, you're like, oh, my God, I don't know what the heck they were doing at halftime. But it clearly wasn't coaching. You know what I mean? This team, polar opposite. Polar opposite. And there's just so much hope that gets instilled as you as a fan. So I'm not even talking to you right now as an analyst. I'm talking to you as a fan. As a fan of Notre Dame, that idea of if the wrong decision gets made for the right reasons, I can live with that. Meaning the wrong decision meaning how it turns out. But you know what? You went with the high skilled or the highly this or the really talented this. And you know what? I get why you made that decision. Didn't work out. It's a bummer. I get why you went into 22 with Tyler Buckner quarterback. I would have gone into Tyler Buckner 22 at quarterback too. Kid's really talented. And your defense had to chase him freaking around the field the whole year before, and you knew what he could do. That's why you didn't go to the portal that year. Now, lessons learned from Marcus Freeman. Perhaps he would have maybe liked to have gone to the portal for depth. But, I get that. So it didn't work out, but I don't think it was the wrong decision. You see what I'm saying? The wrong decision is like, okay, it doesn't work out. But did you go into it with the right thought process to where maybe with the next player that you make the decision for the right reasons on has the talent to take you over the hump? And that's really where I'm coming from, Shaun, is it's that concern of if he makes the wrong decision for the wrong reasons, that makes me feel like, okay, now I'm having flashbacks to the last 30 years where the coaches were just unwilling to just do what they needed to do. That's where I'm coming from.
And see, that for me, I look at last year and I say to myself, this is a staff that has shown that they're willing to do whatever they need to do, even if it's mid-season, 4 games through. Like, yo, this isn't good enough. Like, we're trying to win. I've seen a lot of coaches that will use the way that season started and say, see, this is what I'm talking about. We're just not good enough to win it. And I don't think that staff has that mentality. I think they have the mentality like, hey, this is not good enough, but that doesn't change that we're trying to win a national championship. So what do we need to do?
But that's exactly my point.
Yeah.
I do believe that right now. But if the decision is made based on certain things, then my hope that that's who they are is diminished. That's what I'm saying. I'm excited about this team because I do think that they're going to make the right. And part of that faith is Marcus Freeman, and part of that faith is Mike Denbrock. But I do think they're going to make the right decision. But until we know, that's where I come. I have that in the back of my mind, in the pit of my stomach. I still have a little bit, and I thought this season had completely like erased all of it, but apparently I got a little bit of that BK hangover still in there. And because this is a first for this staff, truly a first. We've never truly seen this staff or Marcus Freeman at all really go into a season with a true quarterback battle. The closest thing we saw was Sam Hartman against Tyler Buckner in the spring. That's the closest we saw. And as well as I thought Tyler Buckner had a great spring, but he needed to be definitely better than Sam Hartman to trust him to start, because Sam was just going to leave if you didn't start him. And then now you're stuck with Tyler. You don't have Drew Pine anymore, and you're now in a situation where it's like, okay, you've got your injury-prone quarterback, and if he doesn't play, you've got redshirt freshman Steve Angeli and true freshman Kenny Minchie. That's the world you'd be living in now if you didn't do that. That wasn't a true comp. It was the closest thing we've seen to it. So that's where I'm at, Shaun, is like, I do agree with everything you're saying. That's why this is a little bit nerve-wracking for me, a tad, because what if they don't? What if they don't? Somebody asked me too, what's the right decision? I'm not telling you what the right decision is. I'm not telling you it's CJ Carr. I'm not telling you it's Kenny Minchie. I'm not telling you it's not Steve Angeli. That's what everybody knows who I think the best quarterback in the room is. I'm not afraid to say that. It's based on how I rank them. It's based on what I've seen last year. I think CJ Carr is the most talented quarterback in the room. And I think if it wasn't for CJ Carr, the biggest storyline this offseason would be Kenny Minchie, because I think he's extremely gifted. If Kenny outplays CJ this spring and fall, so be it. If Steve outplays those other two, so be it. The right decision is going with the guy that Shaun said it. Who's the guy that gives you the best chance to elevate this football team? Maybe not August 31st, but definitely by the time you get to November, December, and January. And that's not always the easiest choice to make, Shaun, because your job is to win football games. And if you say, like, hey, I think this guy gives us the best shot to beat Texas A&M and Miami, but that's the best he's going to be able to win, meaning he may get you through the regular season unscathed. Like, this is my knock on Ian Book. Ian Book was almost always good enough to beat the teams on the schedule in the regular season, except when they played a really elite team like Georgia in 2019, Michigan in 2019, Cincinnati in 2020. Actually, no, that was 2021. Who was the Clemson in 2020 in the ACC title game? Needed overtime to beat a Clemson team that didn't have Trevor Lawrence. You know, like when you played the best teams, you knew he had a ceiling, a lower ceiling. You weren't going to get to the postseason. Ian Book could win a lot of games to get you to the postseason. You weren't winning a championship with him at quarterback. Just weren't. Maybe Phil Jurkovec is a guy you could have won a championship with, but you didn't know if you could beat all the teams in the regular season with him where he was at the time. That was the debate at the time. And I feel like we're kind of there again. That's my concern, is we're kind of there again. You know, even in 2018, Brandon Wimbush, when he was on, could beat anybody that they played. The problem is he could almost lose to Ball State also. And Vanderbilt. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, that was the concern with Brandon. But if Brandon was on, you could have beat anybody that year, 2017 or 2018. So I get that. I get that concern. I get that push. My thing is, play the guy that gives you that plays the best, that is the best playmaker, the guy that leads the offense, but the guy that gives you the chance to elevate this team the most. That's where I'm at, Shaun. That's what I say is the right decision. I have an opinion of who I think that should be, and all of us do. Anyone that tells you they don't have an opinion who they think it's going, Shaun even said that. He goes, I don't know. I can tell you who I think it's going to be, but I don't really know, and that's where we should all be. But where we should also all be, Shaun, is to say the talent in the room is enough that maybe, quote unquote, my guy may not end up being the best guy, and be okay with that as long as it's done for the right reasons. And I think that's where the fan base will be able to rally around whoever the quarterback is. There's a lot of CJ Carr fans out there. I'm one of them from the standpoint of thinking he's the best quarterback in the room. But if Kenny Minchey outplays him from now until the time we play A&M and Kenny's a starter, let's roll, because I think Kenny's really good, and I can support that decision. If it's because Kenny elevated the most, he showed the most potential for current and future success. That's really what it boils down to for me. It can't just be for current success only, because now you're putting a cap on it. It's got to be current and future success, meaning – yeah, okay, can this guy beat this team, and this team in the regular season? Sure, that's part of it. I think they all can. Shaun, I think they go 2-0 with whoever starts at quarterback. And if they lose one of those two, it won't be because, well, if it's because one of the quarterbacks turned the ball over, all of them could have that problem. They could lose to Miami because Steve Angeli gets sacked 9 times. They could lose to Miami because Kenny Minchey can't make good decisions and struggles to make those tough throws. They could lose to Miami because CJ Carr in his first live action throws 2 picks, including a pick 6. And that all 3 of them could lose that game, but they could also all win that game. But who's the guy that gives you the best chance to get into the postseason in December and January and beat Georgia and beat Ohio State and beat Oregon and beat Texas and beat Alabama? That's who the right decision is. So it's about present success, but also with an eye on what we're building to. And that's something I thought Marcus Freeman did a masterful job of last year was, hey, we're building to something bigger than the present moment, which means we're not going to allow ourselves to be defined by this moment and say, well, this is like he never let Northern Illinois go. But they weren't defined by that moment from the standpoint of, well, this is who we are. We just got to accept that. No, that moment defined him because that's not who we are. That's not good enough. That's not what we're going to do. I'm never going to let you forget it, because if we don't do what we're capable of, we can get back to being that team again. And I'm not going to let that happen. So that's the thing is, Shaun, is I want to see him go out there and say, this is the quarterback that gives Notre Dame the opportunity to not only win now, but also win in the future, because whoever starts this year, you're making at least a 2-year commitment to whoever starts this job. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see if Steve is the best guy today, but you don't think he'll be the best guy in a month, then take your lumps with the kid who you think will be the best quarterback in a month. Because in today's game, you can lose a game in September and still be a playoff team. That's where I'm coming from, Shaun.
So let me speak to this, because I will confidently say, let me give you a scenario, because we're talking about these guys, talking about all 3 quarterbacks being the determining factor by their play, which you can't eliminate that. That's going to play a major part. Let me give you something that might ease a little bit of your nervousness. Marcus Freeman has been there and knows exactly what needs to be done in every area of this team to not only get back there, but to win it. He has his checklist for what he needs to see out of his quarterback, and he's going to take the guy that checks off every box. That Marcus Freeman knows. He's coming into this spring. No, I know. I know what I need to see, and I know what it looks like, because I saw it last year. Doesn't have to be just like that, or doesn't have to be built just like that, but I know what I need to see. But it's
not just what he saw from Riley.
No.
What I'm saying is last year's playoff run showed him that it's not just there's a theme with all the teams that were true title contenders of who did and didn't have that thing at quarterback. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that this run showed him.
That's why I
It's
said
not
every
just
area.
what Riley did.
Yeah.
It's
I said every area. He
right.
knows every component what it needs to be.
Right.
He knows that. So it's not just him coming in like, okay, I just need no. He knows everything. He's been on the run. He's observed. He has his checklist for where every area of his team needs to be at the end of spring. So that gives me confidence that even when he's looking at the quarterback situation, he knows exactly what he needs to see. And if he doesn't see it, he's going to make the decision, not determined upon being safe. He's making it based upon, okay, now I know.
I hope.
What needs.
Right? This is what I'm saying to you, Shaun. I agree with everything you're saying. I agree with everything you're saying, but my only thing is, because we don't know for sure how he's going to handle this type of situation, in the back of my head, there's still that unknown aspect of it. And if what you say is how it plays out, like, we're both hopeful that that's how it's going to play out. We both think, based on how the season went, that that's how it's going to play out. My only, it's not even a pushback, because it's my dark fear is that this is such a different decision. If you make the wrong decision at left guard, you can make that change in game 3 and nobody talks about it. Except, man, what a great move to make that change. If you make the wrong choice at quarterback, nobody will ever let it go. I mean, well, if only they would have started Sam Darnold sooner in 2016. I mean, not like, look, dude, maybe, but that's another example of, Sam Darnold didn't just figure out how to play football in week 3. You went with the safe choice in 2016, and look what happened. It cost you a chance to play for a championship. Because they still would have lost to Bama no matter what. But they probably don't lose to Stanford and Utah. Now, all of a sudden, they're sitting there 11-1, 10-2 at worst at the end of the year, and they're in the college football playoffs. Because that team was good. And I think the title game would have been Clemson versus USC in that scenario. So, I mean, that was a great USC team by the end of the year. But they waited too long to make that move. So my point is, I believe that so far he's shown that he'll be that way with a lot of other things. And I believe I believe you're right. There's always a checklist. Coaches do this. This is what I need to see. But then there comes that moment where you got to make that decision. And like I said, it's a back of my mind thing. It's not me saying he's going to do it. It's a back of my mind thing. But when it comes to quarterback, are you willing to take the same kind of chances you would with starting corner or starting D tackle or starting Mike linebacker or even starting left tackle? And my reservation comes not from a reservation about Marcus Freeman. It's a reservation of the last 20 years and 30 years of being a Notre Dame fan. And that's also part of my excitement. This is where I'll end it here, Shaun. It's also part of my excitement because if he does make the right decision, even if it doesn't necessarily pan out perfectly in 2025, it gives me hope that I'm even more convicted that my prediction about a title at Notre Dame is going to be coming soon is enhanced even greater. Even if I'm wrong about CJ or Kenny or what, and they're what he goes with, and then that guy gets in there and he just doesn't have it. It gives me conviction that when that player is there, he won't be afraid to take that chance. Because if you start CJ Carr, you are taking a chance. If you start Kenny Minchie, you are taking a chance because you're putting a guy that's never played a meaningful down of football and saying, go win us a championship. That's a risk. That's a chance. Just like Dabo took with Trevor Lawrence in 2016 or 2018. Just like Nick Saban took when he benched Jalen Hurts and put in Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, there's a lot of coaches that have had to make these type of tough decisions. And sometimes, Shaun, it's like, I don't know how it's going to go, but I'm going to be convicted in, like you said, it is the checklist. Because like we also have seen coaches, mainly the last one, that this guy checks off all the boxes I say that I care about, but I'm still going to go with that guy. Everything that Brian Kelly said the quarterback was supposed to be at Notre Dame was, with the exception of God-given ability, was the opposite of who Deshaun Kaiser was. but he still started Sean Kaiser. That's where I'm coming from. You made the wrong choice for the wrong reasons. And that's again, so it's not even about Marcus Freeman. The concern I have is what I said, but the excitement is, Shaun, if he does make the right decision for the right reasons, it gives me hope that he'll be that guy, because the spotlight has never been shined brighter on Marcus Freeman than it is right now. Because he took him far enough to get all that praise, but he hasn't taken him far enough to eliminate all the criticism. And now it's like, all eyes are on you, my man. What are you going to do? And that's when you truly find out who the great ones are and who isn't. Is how do you handle, like it was easy for Brian Kelly in the 2012 season to get to that point, in my opinion, because they came into that season unranked. There was no pressure on that 2012 football team. At any point in time, there was never any pressure on that 2012 football team until when? The title game. They literally began the season an unranked team. This year, there was some pressure over on Notre Dame. Certainly some pressure over Notre Dame. And the pressures even got even greater after the loss, because a week ago, everyone was saying you're a playoff team. But even that pressure is not going to match what this pressure will be for him because of what he did achieve. And if he stands up to that pressure and says, I'm not changing, then my hope that he won't change will be enormous. But it's still a bit of an unknown, and that's what kind of has me a little bit excited. And somebody asking, would have started Malik Zaire over Deshaun Kaiser? I've said this literally 1,000 times. Yes, I would have started Malik Zaire over Deshaun Kaiser. 100%. Because I knew, and Andrew, you can ask me on the board some of this, I'm not going to say in the show, I knew what kind of leader Deshaun Kaiser was and wasn't. And I'm not, in college, you're not running an NFL draft minor league system. You're trying to win football games in college football. And I know what was on the inside of that guy and what wasn't. So that's also, Andrew, that's a really childish response, dude. Seriously? Come on, dude. Be better than that. I'm sorry. I thought for a second there you were trying to have a grown-up conversation. That's my bad. We'll move on.
I started to tell you let it go because I already knew where it was headed.
Yeah. So that's my bad. I thought we were going to have like a real grown-up conversation. So that's my fault. So anyway, Shaun, so that's going to do it for the quarterback conversation. I mean, do you at least understand where I'm coming from of what my concern is? It's not even really about Marcus. It's about the unknown of what he will or won't do. So, yeah, that's what we're going to find out. So we'll know here soon enough. We'll certainly know here soon enough. So that's going to do it for part 2. Part 3 is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to rank the top 10 college football coaches according to us. We both have our own opinions. We didn't do the IB top 25 type of thing like I did with Trevor. We both are going to give you our top 10 list. We're going to do that next. But before we do, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And if you've not done so, make sure that you sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. I also want to point out here real quick that I don't want to hear the second-round draft pick crap, because that second-round draft pick led Notre Dame to a 4-8 record. So you can miss me with all that NFL draft pick stuff. Okay. All right, let's get to the final part of today's show. Shaun, we're going to talk about the top college coaches in the country. And so we're going to have some fun with this one. So before we kind of get into our list, let's set some criteria, because in order to critique a list or to push back on something, you have to understand what the criteria is for a starting point for the list. And so here's kind of what we've come up with. So number 1 is overall track record doesn't really matter. So I'm not going to look at Bill Belichick of the Tar Heels and say, well, he should be the number 1 coach. Why? Because the dude has 7 Super Bowl wins, 6 Super Bowl wins, right? It's completely irrelevant to today. If Mac Brown was still the head coach at North Carolina, he's not in my top 10 because he has a national title and had a lot of great years, because right now that's not who he is. This isn't 05 to 09 Texas. This is a different era. Same thing with more recent success. If a guy won a title in 2014, doesn't mean he's a great 13. So like if Jimbo was still coaching, I'm not going to put him on my top 10 because he won a title back in 2013. It's a different game, different era. So what our criteria is, big picture will have some say in it, but the primary criteria, because you can't ignore that Dabo won a title, 2 titles in the last 10 years, just because our criteria is the last 5. Our primary criteria is a combination of last 5 years success, and then of that 5 years, the closer to it, the more emphasis we put on it, but not overselling the success of 2024. That has to also be part of it too. And so how that's viewed can be different from different people. It also does take into account the projection that we have of the coach. And by that, we mean that has a lot to do with recruiting success, track record of bringing in high level talent. I mean, like things along those lines. Like I'm going to have some critiques for Dan Lanning, major critiques for Dan Lanning, but I also would be a complete fool to ignore what he's shown from a talent acquisition standpoint, to just bang on him because I don't like him, right? So it's about giving honest assessment to track record and projection based on what these coaches have shown from a ability to bring in talent. And so we're going to have some fun with this. I'm looking forward to this, Shaun. I want you to start off. So what we're going to do is this. Shaun's going to give his top 10, and then I'm going to give my top 10. And then we're going to kind of talk about some of the ones we have the difference of opinion. And then we're also both going to ask each other questions about certain guys. Why'd you have that guy there? Why'd you have that guy there? And those type of things. And so we're going to do that. That's going to be a real fun part of this. And we're going to have that. We're going to have that conversation. So a little bit of a back and forth, not so much debating like, dude, you're wrong for having this guy there, but more so explain to me why. And there can be some pushback. Like, well, here's why I don't have him there in that regard. And that's going to make it fun. We don't have the same top 10. I think we have 8 of the same top 10. I think is what we decided. I think 8 of the same top 10, but we definitely have different order.
Yeah. Different order. 8 of the top 10. Same. Yep.
Yeah.
You want me to go 10-1?
10-1. Yep.
Okay. All right.
If you want to give a quick, just a real brief synopsis, like just why you have him 10, we can do that too. Just like real quick. Like I'll give you an example. We both have the same guy at number 10.
Mm-hmm.
Like, look, when you look at what he did at JMU, turning around a team like Indiana as quick as he did, getting to the playoff, you can't deny this guy can flat out coach. Kirk Cignetti's number 10 for me. Boom, like that.
Yeah. Same thing. Kirk Cignetти, like you said, even before he got to JMU, the job he did at the lower levels, that program, he is a program builder. It's obvious. Whether or not now that he's in the big time at the Big Ten, can he follow that up and turn Indiana into a consistent winner is something that we're going to need to see. I think if he's successful this year, he has a chance for me to jump a couple of spots, honestly. If he can make Indiana, if Indiana gets back to the playoffs, then I'm like, okay, this guy might be 7 or 8 for me next year when we rank the top 10. So he's 10 for me on my list, Kirk Cignetti at Indiana. I think he does an incredible job. I think just the talent acquisition, the way he's been able to work the portal, and now how the recruiting has even taken a step forward shows that he can do that as well at a school like Indiana that hasn't been linked to great recruiting or receiving great transfers as well.
Ever.
Yeah, in football, shall I say. Yeah.
Ever. Like, there's been a kid here, kid there, but never the way that he's done it.
So I said I made one switch after we actually started the show, and I'm going to put I'm just impressed. There is nothing from title contention. There's absolutely nothing from having like a flat out elite team, but just from what I hear, what I know, his operation, and how he gets the very best out of minimal talent. Now you can subtract from him in recruiting, saying he's not able to get top talent to where he is, but I really have a great appreciation for the job that Matt Campbell has consistently done at Iowa State. Very similar to the job that Kirk Ferentz did for the first decade when he got to Iowa. I think Kirk Ferentz has fallen off a little bit, because of lackluster success over the last 5 years, you can expand it to maybe the last 5 to 7 years. But early on in Iowa, Kirk Ferentz was doing a lot. And I think even from a development standpoint, that program does a great job at developing certain offensive tackle. They still develop defensive backs. Go ahead.
You know how good of a job Kirk Ferentz did his entire career? That a guy that's won 10 games in 3 of his last 6 seasons is considered falling off.
Yes.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
But still have won 10 their last 6 years. They've gone since 2015, 12-2, 8-5, 8-5, 9-4, 10-3, 6-2, 10-4, 8-5, 10-4, and 8-5. And you and I are neither going to have him in the top 10 because of I think the bar that he set for himself. To your point, so it just made me laugh when you're like he's falling off. I'm like, dude's won 10 games in 3 of his last 5 years, and you're right, he has fallen off. And this is why you don't hire your kids. So I'm just saying, like, it's a coincidence. But anyway, I'm sorry, Shaun. I just thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah. So for me, Matt Campbell, I think this past season, even looking at, I remember watching that team, like the fact that they were even leading the Big 12 and got to that point before that home loss to Texas Tech that kind of derailed the season. I mean, they had the big wide receivers, but defensively, what they were able to do, it's like he never has top talent, but he's still able to do a lot with what he has and get the most out of the kids that he has. And he develops. He does put players into the NFL as well. He has some, from what I hear, he has some defensive backs coming in the next 2 or 3 years. Some young defensive backs.
He had a couple of 2,000 receivers last year, too, at Iowa State.
Yeah. With a quarterback that, in my opinion, is not the best passer. He's just really a gamer. So,
Anthony Beck is going to be showing up at your house any minute talking about his kid like that. All right, so you got 10.
Hey, he's tough. He's a tough-minded kid. He's a winner. Hey, he's a
Matt Campbell quarterback, though, Shaun. Like, that's the thing. Is like that's the kind of gritty kid that Matt Campbell's going to win. Matt Campbell's a former D end. So you got 10 Cignetti, 9 you said is Campbell. Right?
9 is Campbell. 8.
Okay, so keep going.
8 is James Franklin for me. James Franklin. He deserves all of the critique. Big game, James. His inability to elevate that program above Penn State and Michigan and recent success. Now you could throw Oregon into the mix. I will say this. I came away with their performance against Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, their performance against Notre Dame, in a loss. I thought for the most part they outplayed Notre Dame for a large segment of that particular Orange Bowl. So I thought I saw incremental improvement. I just don't know. For me, I think goes back to what you said and your nervousness. I think he's had opportunities to make good decisions or big time decisions that he's failed trying to be safe. I thought he made great hires and adding to his staff in the offseason. Now his OC DC combination is up there in college football. Okay. So now does he open up in big games? Does he make the right decisions at certain positions to go ahead and move things forward? He's lucky to be coming off that loss and bringing a veteran quarterback who actually took a step forward last year. So, everybody will point to that interception that ended the Orange Bowl for all purposes. But
because Notre Dame has no track record of forcing quarterbacks into turnovers, none whatsoever.
I don't know why. Look, just go to overtime, but it is what it is. James Frank for me is 8. Dan Lanning, for all the reasons you pointed out. The man can just acquire talent. Now, how much of that is him? How much is that is the financial backing? Nike being connected to Oregon, NIL? We'll see, right? But every time he goes up, though, Georgia spanked him, and he backed out of that. He didn't even want Georgia to come to Oregon. He backed out of the deal, right? He won a close game against Ohio State. The next time they played, Ohio State spanked them. So now that is something that he's going to have to get over with. I think the toughest game this year for them will be going on the road to Penn State. Like, all right, because you can't go to Penn State and get spanked. Like, if it's a close game, All right, but they have lost a lot. They lost a lot this year, right? They bring back talent, but they lost a lot of talent as well. So it's going to be a very interesting. But I have to the track record, the ability to win. He has done that, but he couldn't beat Kalen DeBoer. He struggled against Washington. He struggled against Kirby. So every time he's a bully,
and
like it's
and his win over Day got negated by an absolute beatdown.
Absolutely.
But
he's like that front runner right now for me.
I think like, bully is
when he got a chance. Word. He got a chance to bully Deion Sanders in his first year. You do all the antics and stuff. Cool. Yeah. But when you meet the other guys and the antics don't matter, and you actually have to outcoach the other guy that's a great coach, you're not successful. So he's sitting at 7 for me. Kalen DeBoer. Look, man, this is the crazy thing. If he had stayed in Washington, he's probably higher on this list for me. Let me tell you why. Last year, like you said, he didn't walk into an empty cup, right? Tough situation following a legend down in Alabama, but you had a lot of talent. You had a returning quarterback that made the playoffs and lost in the Rose Bowl. You had all of that coming back. You had an offensive line coming back. Kalen DeBoer, in a better situation, talent-wise. I think your situation in Washington with what you had in your last year was better because of the continuity. But the roster talent was much better with what you had in Alabama, which goes to show how much continuity matters and intangibles matter. Now, with all of that being said, it's an argument to say you could be top 5. You might even be 4. I might even flip-flop you with the person I have at 4. I could do that. Absolutely. This is why you love these type of conversations.
This middle section is close too, Shaun. We both acknowledged before the show started, we were like, I had a tough time with this. You had a tough time with this. Like, we both kind of had that back and forth aspect to some of these rankings. It wasn't a no-brainer 1, 2, 3. It used to be no-brainer Saban's 1, no-brainer Dabo's 2. I mean, there isn't that as much. It's a lot. This was a little bit of a tougher list for me. With some of the legends kind of stepping out. This is one of the tougher years I've had to just easily rank the top 10 because the legends stepping out, but then some young guys that are stepping in, that's track records are impressive in a short period of time, but they don't have that longevity that maybe some others do. So
we revisiting this next year, which I'm sure we will. If he takes Alabama back to where we expect him to be as a premier program, he can get a bump up. But, I mean, you underwhelmed this year. And you can't sit here and say, well, it was transition, this, that, dude. You had a talented roster. With a quarterback returning, with an offensive line returning, is like losses to Vanderbilt, getting smacked by Michigan and bullied by Michigan in the bowl game. Like, nah. I expected a little bit of a step back because of Nick Saban retiring and just being difficult to replace a legend like that and have the players accept your message, versus Nick Saban and what they were used to. But no, the season we got, that was a disappointment for me. Marcus Freeman is at 5. First of all, it's Notre Dame. It's the most difficult head coaching position in all of college football, right? And I told you this. I want to hear all the noise, whether it's Notre Dame fans, media, or anybody else, that at some point was ready to jump off the train. Because you said he couldn't do it. Forget winning a national championship. You said he couldn't recover from Northern Illinois. You said this is the end. You said he couldn't recruit and build a roster. You said he was going to give you the same thing that Brian Kelly gave you. Every class has been called a Brian Kelly class. Well, guess what? That means he's a better chef than Brian Kelly. Because if they got the same ingredients, he's cooking a whole lot better, in my opinion. He's cooking a whole lot better. Oh, well, it's only been, you're right. Sit back and watch. Enjoy the show. That's the way I feel. Sit back and watch and enjoy the show. If you need to see more, that's fine. He sits at 5 for me. You got something? Because I'm ready to go to 4.
I'm ready, man. I'm letting you go.
He said
I
enough.
interjected too much on 10 and 9. I'm letting you go.
I love the trajectory of Notre Dame and where Marcus Freeman has it. Steve Sarkisian, 4 for me. Let me be honest. This is what I was thinking about, flip-flopping him and Kalen DeBoer. I really was. And then I said to myself, well, back-to-back semifinals for Steve Sarkisian. Does he have an advantage being in the state of Texas from a recruiting standpoint? You're darn right. It's more impressive for Dan Lanning and what he does at Oregon than it is for like Steve Sarkisian to wake up, take a 10-minute drive, and see one of the best defensive tackles or offensive tackles or wide receivers in the nation on a daily basis. You know, it's kind of an advantage. He has a recruiting advantage, but he still has to close the deal. I think I had this conversation with you offline. I don't know if he's proven to me that he's developed a guy at quarterback. Quinn Ewers was an Ohio State commit that transferred. He has yet to recruit, get the commitment, and then develop a guy at the quarterback position. That's what he's known for. That's what I'm waiting.
Him and Sark are in a very similar position, or Sark and Freeman are in very similar positions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Sark has done it 2 years in a row. Like he's gotten his team to the semifinals 2 years in a row, and absolutely, they were really two bad calls away from really having a shot to beat Ohio State this year, right? That defense that they call that blitz, they allowed the big time screenplay for the touchdown, and then they get down there and call some of the softest calls right there going in to tie up the game in the fourth quarter, right? That is something Sark is going to have to get over, because it seems like when they go up against teams, they don't have the physical mindset to go and take it. They lean on trying to outsmart people, trying to get to the outside on a run against Ohio State. That's a fast defense. What are you doing? I wish they had seen Notre Dame's first drive. Like, just line up, put in your running quarterback. If you got to take Quinn out, put in your running quarterback and just go straight ahead.
Which they had done.
Yes, they had. And they went away from it at the most important time. So that's Sarkisian for me at 4. Ryan Day, look, all the critique. Yes, Michigan has slapped them around for 4 straight years. They go to Michigan this year. Michigan might slap him around for 5 straight years, but he answered the bell, right? Yes, you could say, if there wasn't an expanded playoff, he might have been on the hot seat to lose his job. That's fair, but he did it. We can say all of that. He won the national championship at Ohio State. He did it. Well, they put $20 million into the team. Yes, they did, but they
weren't the only team spending money on NIL.
It's worth it. It's worth it. As long as you win, that's what's matter. I'll give you a perfect, real quick synopsis. What's the difference between the San Francisco 49ers and the Philadelphia Eagles as they currently sit? They both spent significant money to win, and they both,
and the Niners haven't. Yeah,
they both have lost and had to back off the cap because of the investment they made. The difference is the Eagles hoisted the trophy. So you can say whatever you want about NIL, $20 million. Ohio State hoisted the trophy. Yes.
Twice.
Yeah. And that's all that matters. And I hope Notre Dame elevates themselves in the NIL space, the recruiting space, invest into the program, facilities, all of that. But it has to matter and be validated by winning. And that's what we want. Ryan Day did that. Just literally the best resume, honestly, long term, is probably this guy I have at 2, and that's Dabo Swinney. Look, I critique Dabo for a lot of things that really don't have anything to do with, it's like his handling of certain situations. But as a football coach, outside of his hiring of his assistant coaches, the direction of the program, and the transition that he's made and how he's learned from mistakes that he's made and how the trajectory of Clemson seems to be on the uptick, you have to tip your cap. And this man went to battle with Nick Saban in Nick Saban's prime, Alabama's prime, and said, hold my beer. I'll take that national championship trophy. That's pretty impressive. Dabo's number 2 for me. And then, I mean, look, in my opinion, Kirby's he's the Don Dada right now. He just is. I will say this, though. I've been disappointed with some of Kirby's decisions. I think he could have moved on from Carson Beck last year if he really looked at certain things. I think the decision to go to Gunnar Stockton, because I think very much you talked about it. It's not so much who's the most talented, who has the best arm, who has the more stars coming into the program, who can drive this car the best, right? If you hop into a NASCAR, the car is top notch, right? Let's say you hop into a NASCAR with the top racing company. They're known for building the best cars. They go the fastest. The difference is the driver. That's the difference. Some drivers can make that same car go just a little bit faster. That can end up being a win when the checkered flag comes out. And for me, I think he hasn't made certain decisions to allow Georgia to kind of be that team going across the finish line first. But I'm excited about how he rebounds, because great coaches learn their lessons, transition, and say, okay, now I need to adjust. We saw Nick Saban do that in the middle of his run. Kirby's approaching that season for his program where he's going to have to look within himself, look within his program, make the necessary adjustments to see if that program has another gear to get a couple of more national championships. So that's my list. That's 10-1 for me. Really simple, debatable. Let's have at it, B. I can't wait to see or hear your top 10.
Shaun, there's other years I'd have been like, I'd have tried to lay a smackdown on some takes, just in general, but because there's so much, just like, especially with the criteria we look at, like if you're going to put like last 10 years, then Dabo arguably should be number 1. If we're going to like just entirety of their careers. Let me give you mine, and then we can have some take with us. Number 1 is what made this decision so difficult for me is because there was a lot of coaches that I would have had in the top 10 or right there in the debate, if not for really bad 24 seasons. And while I tend not to overrate a great season, I do put a little bit more on a major underachievement. And when I mean underachievement, I don't mean Marcus Freeman going 9-4 in 2022 was a bit of an underachievement. You had no business losing to Marshall and Stanford. That's different than, Kansas just being really bad this year or Utah being really bad this year. Jeff Brom is a guy that I struggled with where to place him. I don't think Louisville was disappointing this year. They just didn't take a jump. And he's on the verge. He was my first guy out, actually. But like Lance Leopold and Kyle Whittingham are two guys, especially Whittingham. I had Whittingham in my top 10 last year. I had Mike Gundy in my top 10 last year, I believe. But you can't go 3-9 and get obliterated every week and expect me to still view you as a top coach in college football right now. So I will be honest, a really bad season is going to impact me more than a great season, just because I feel like sometimes the great seasons are just kind of luck goes your way. Sometimes a bad season can be that too. But with a lot of these guys, Shaun, I don't view them as like they just like I just don't think Lance Leopold did a great job with his Kansas team this year. I don't think Jeff Brom took that next jump. I don't think that Kyle Whittingham did a great job. You're literally that dependent on Cam Rising, then you've done some things in your program. Like that's kind of my thing. So that those are some of those guys, because I've always said, Shaun, and you and I talked about this, is that this isn't a who has the best record. Like who are the best coaches of the biggest schools? Because some years they're a 9-3 at Kansas is more impressive than Georgia going 10-2 or 11-1. Way more impressive. Oklahoma State, that's what Mike Gundy, if I were to take more than just the last 5 years into consideration, Mike Gundy's probably still in my top 10. But I just, there just were some seasons in there that were just really bad. And I don't know that they're trending in a good direction. Because like you have the 12-2 and 10-4 from 21 and 23, but sandwiched between that was a 7-6 and a 3-9. And so like those are some things I look at too. So here's my 10 based on last 5 years and trajectory. My number 10 is with you, Curt Cignetti. Like that's an easy one. I mean, it's not even just about what did it Indiana. That could have just been like that fluky 1 year. It's what he's done overall. 49-9 the last 5 years, and 30-6 the last 3 years. And you could talk about, well, he wanted a JMU. And I'm like, okay, cool, that's fine. He wanted JMU. That's not a big time program, but let's not forget that he inherited it. He was at a JMU program that he was part of the transition from FCS to FBS. So his 19-4 record at James Madison that he did in 22 and 23 was literally that program's first 2 years playing playing FBS football. So he was part of that. And then to go 11-2 in Indiana is exceptional. Like, I don't think people realize how good of a job that is. To go 11-2 at a place like Indiana. Yeah, but they got people Ohio State and Notre Dame. Well, duh. They're going to lose to those teams. They don't have the teams to play with them. But a lot of those wins, and then just to pound on some people that people view as like highly programs, is why he's number 10 for me. Don't particularly care for him a whole lot, but you can't hate on that man's skill. And speaking of coaches I don't care for a whole lot that are in my top 10, Brian Kelly is still in my top 10. Brian Kelly is my number 9, and somebody in the chat said that, Brian Kelly can't win the big game. Yeah, I get that. But here's the thing. If you're going to tell me he's not in your top 10 because he can't win the big game, then you got to name me 10 coaches that are better at winning big games. Because I know he's one of the few guys on this list that has a win over Nick Saban, right? I'm not going to sit here and defend Brian Kelly and like make him a big game coach. He isn't. Which is why he is 10th. Because here's a funny stat, Shaun. If you look at the last 5 years, and you go with the wins over the last 5 years, I mean, there aren't a whole lot of coaches that have more wins the last 5 years than Brian Kelly. He's a top 5 coach. If you're going to go last 5 years, I mean, if you go last 5 seasons of the guys that I have in my top 10, Brian Kelly's 4th he's tied for 3rd with 50 with Dabo. But reasons I don't have him higher than 8 is, number one, I don't think their trajectory isn't great. We'll see if they're better this year. He lost 3 games with one of the – I mean, he didn't have 2019 LSU talent on offense, but it wasn't like incredibly far off. You know what I mean? And you lost 3 games. And then, of course, at Notre Dame, we've seen what Marcus Freeman has done, taking Notre Dame to that next level by doing things that Brian Kelly always uses excuses why he couldn't win or why I don't have him higher. But it's hard for me to justify not having him in the top 10 because, again, we can say whatever we want about Brian Kelly, but the last 5 years, his teams have gone 10-2, 11-1, 10-4, 10-3, and 9-4. His worst year is 9-4. Now, the reason I have him 8, not higher, is because his worst year is the most recent one. So I think there's a downward trajectory a little bit with this program. If he bounces back this year, he may be able to climb up a couple spots, but he also has to be careful because there's a couple coaches, young coaches, that are kind of chomping at the bit, ready to pass him up, in my opinion. If they have another 9-3 or kind of a solid 10-2 year, but not a great 10-2 year, I'm ready to have some guys pass him up. I mean, if Curt Cignetti and Brian Kelly both have the same record this year, Curt Cignetti's passing Brian Kelly up, no problem. The only reason I don't have Cignetti ahead of him is because I at least want to see a second year at the Power 4 level from Cignetti before I'm ready to jump him up way too much. So that's why I have Brian Kelly on my list at number 9. I do have James Franklin number 8. Again, same thing. A lot of these guys in the bottom of the top 10 are going to have a lot of success, but they have more scars, more flaws. You can say whatever you want about James Franklin not being able to win the big game. He isn't, and he hasn't. Same thing with Brian Kelly. It's a problem with a lot of coaches. What's the big game Steve Sarkisian has won? The Big 12 championship over Oklahoma State? It beat Alabama on the road. Well, a lot of these coaches have games like that on their resume. The reason I have Penn State 8 is just consistency and trajectory. I do think Penn State is projecting in the right direction. I think that they obviously get into the playoff this year, playing for the Big Ten championship. They actually showed me a little something that I hadn't seen from him. He actually is if you look at the growth in the last 5 years, started this stretch of 5 years off at 4-5, then jumped to 7-6, and then the last 3 years they've gone 11-2, 10-3, and 13-3. The guy has won a Rose Bowl, and the guy has won a playoff game, and he's also won a Fiesta Bowl. Now, he should have won all those games because he had a better team, but you still got to win them. And so that's why I had James Franklin's number 8. Now, I do think there's a gap between number 8 and then the rest of my list. So there is a bit of a separation here. Number 7 for me is Steve Sarkisian. And I even thought about putting Sarkisian down below James Franklin. And honestly, the reason I don't have him there is that win over Bama. Yes, he has some wins like that. James Franklin does, but it's been a while. It isn't recent. Sark last year in 2023 went to Alabama and beat Alabama, a Nick Saban coached Alabama team that went to the playoffs. Got to give him credit for that. In a year where Kirby's team lost to that Alabama team. Can't dismiss that. And that's what separated it here for me. But here's my frustration with the hype about Steve Sarkisian. Shaun, you know I'm actually a Steve Sarkisian fan. I think he's a really good coach, and I study his offense a lot. I think he's a brilliant offensive mind. And look, go back-to-back 10-plus years at Texas is not something that's been done in a while. I mean, it's been a while. But here's my thing. This guy's been a head football coach for now 11 years, and he has as many 10-win seasons as Marcus Freeman does. He has fewer 10-win seasons than Dan Lanning does. Like, we're acting like the last 2 years defines his entire career. And I'm like, can we let the guy get like a big win first? I mean, like seriously, like what are we defining it on? They went 0 for 3 against the only 3 teams that they played all year that had a comparable roster to theirs. They lost all 3 of them. Georgia beat them twice, and Ohio State beat them, and got dominated at home by Georgia. So Kalen DeBoer beat them twice at Washington. Twice. Beat them in the what bowl was it? Is the Alamo Bowl in 22? And then obviously beat him in the college football playoff in 23. So Sarkisian has a chance to take that next level. And honestly, the reason I have him at 7 is not just the Bama game, but also the recruiting job they're doing is really good. Like, his ability to acquire talent is even better than James Franklin. But my counter to that was one of the reasons I consider James Franklin ahead of Sark. One of my biggest knocks on James Franklin, apart from winning big games for much of his career, was I thought he was not good at making coaching hires. I mean, John Donovan is his OC. Like, he had that really nice stretch with Kalen DeBoer. Defense has been different. He's had some good DC. He had Tim Banks on his staff, but offensively is what I'm referring to here. But the Chris Kotelnicki or the Andy Kotelnicki hire was really big. And then he also showed me something this offseason. He lost Tom Allen, who I said last year was a great hire, and he lost Jawan Sider, who I think was a great hire for Notre Dame, and he replaced him with really good football coaches. That showed me something. That showed me a little something. And so his recent track record is much better than it was, and so I have to give him credit for that. That's no longer a criticism of mine. I think he's done a really good job. I mean, he loses Sean Spencer to the NFL, replaces him with another really good D-line coach. Like, that's the mark of a guy that's running a program the right way. In-game coaching, still bad. Like you said, it's not that James Franklin's not willing to take risks. Sometimes he takes unnecessary risks at the wrong time in situations where your chances of success are very slim. The Notre Dame game is a perfect example. Notre Dame had all the momentum in that game. All the momentum. You got 30 seconds. You got to go 50 yards against that defense. It's unlikely. Your receivers haven't caught a pass all game. So like maybe run like some kind of trick play there or something like that. But that's who James Franklin is. But Sark at 7 for me, trajectory is strong, but he's got to do more. Marcus Freeman, James Franklin's been a head coach Steve Sarkisian's been a head coach for 11 years. Marcus Freeman's been a head coach for 3. Marcus Freeman has more playoff wins than Steve Sarkisian. And Marcus Freeman has also won 2 of those playoff games where he was the lower seed. And Steve Sarkisian's playoff wins this year were both against lower ranked teams, excuse me. Marcus Freeman's two of them came against higher ranked teams, not higher seeded teams. They were ranked higher than Arizona State, even though they were seeded higher, and they were ranked higher than Clemson. Marcus Freeman, and I believe Notre Dame was the underdog in both games that they beat teams that ranked higher. Weren't they an underdog against Georgia? And then they were fell to an underdog on game day against Penn State. although they were the favorite for much of that game, much of that week. So I'm not as impressed with Steve Sarkisian's record as a head coach. Now, offensive mind, brilliant. And yeah, he got a transfer quarterback, but they got Quinn Ewers in what would have been his freshman year. He reclassified and spent that year at Ohio State. It's not like Ohio State developed him for a long time. They had to develop him, so I give him some credit for that. But he never got Quinn Ewers over that hump, and that's a question that I have. Can he do that with Arch? We're going to find out. Guy can recruit. Guy can win a lot of games, but he's got a lot to show me that he's a guy that can take that next step. And I think your point about the late game play calling against Ohio State was an exact example of what my problem is. Steve Sarkisian is a great offensive mind. Who's a good head football coach. And that combination makes them a really good football team. But if he wants to take that next step, he's got to show me a willingness to be tougher and not always smarter. You know, and it's like he's always trying to outsmart people. And you know why? Because he can. But sometimes you're facing someone else who's really smart, and it just comes down to, do you trust your kids or not? Or are you trying to show everyone how smart you are? And if he can do that, then he's going to – because he could skyrocket up this list in the next 4 or 5 years. I mean, he could go up to number 1 in the next 4 or 5 years. He's just got a lot he's got to show me first. Number 6 on my list is Dan Lanning. I was back and forth on Lanning and Sarkisian, but the reality is Steve Sarkisian in the last 3 years at Texas has gone 8-5, 12-2, and 13-3, and that's obviously very good. Dan Lanning in the last 3 years at Oregon has gone 10-3, 12-2, and 13-1. He's been even more successful. I think winning the Big Ten in a year with a national champion and 4 playoff teams came from that league is impressive. You had to beat Ohio State in the regular season to win the Big Ten champion. To get to that point, you had to beat Penn State on a neutral field that was far closer to Happy Valley than it is to Eugene, Oregon, to win that championship. I give them credit for that. They had some ugly wins this year, which I liked. But here's my thing. And the other reason he ranks as high is because he can absolutely match Texas from talent acquisition, if not surpass. I don't care what the reasons are. I think it's a little bit of, yes, he has great resources, but I also think he's a great salesman. He's a BSer. But when I see him going up against the top coaches on this list, they not only lose, Shaun, they get blown out a lot. I mean, it's his first game at Oregon. You can't hold that against him. Notre Dame lost to Ohio State, a playoff Ohio State team, 21-10 in Marcus Freeman's first game at Ohio State, in a game they led for much of the game.
Fourth quarter lead.
It's like 15 seconds in the third quarter is when Ohio State took a lead, right? I think it's something like that.
You're right. Right before the fourth quarter. Yep.
And that Oregon roster in 2022 was more talented than the Notre Dame roster in 2022. Mm-hmm. And you lost 49-3 in that game. You got outcoached by Kalen DeBoer 3 times, where a team with a better roster lost to the team with better coaching. And then this year, you beat Ryan Day in the regular season. You beat James Franklin in the Big Ten title game. You get credit for that. That's not a dismissing that. But when the lights were brightest, you not only lost, you got blown out again, 41-21. And let's be honest, Shaun, it wasn't that close. They made it closer late in the game. They had no chance in that game. They did not. How do you not show up for that football game? So that's why Dan Lanning is there for me. And honestly, why I even now am struggling with my Sark and Lanning reference ranking. Like even now, I'm still like, I think I should have had Sark 6 and Lanning 7. So I'm a little bit back and forth on that one. Like I don't even feel good about that one. But the other thing is, I do think Lanning has done a really nice job with hiring offensive coaches, but I don't love his defensive coaching hires. Like a defensive coach should have a better defense than the one he's had the last couple of years. But Kenny Dillingham and Will Stein, somebody in the chat just mentioned this actually also. Andrew Gilmore said he's been great at hiring OCs. Absolutely. Will Stein. But you're a defensive guy who hasn't, I think, made good defensive coach hires. So that's a bit of a concern for me. But I am kind of torn on that one, Shaun. Number 5 for me is Marcus Freeman. And a big reason why I contemplated putting him over Dabo is because of the postseason success this year. But Marcus Freeman's second best team lost to Dabo's worst team of the last 5 years. And that mattered to me. And yes, Notre Dame has the win over Clemson in 2022, but that game, Notre Dame should have won that game. You should have beat Clemson last year, and that game still bothers me. Notre Dame got out-coached in that game. And so that's kind of where I'm a little bit back and forth on that one. But you look at Marcus Freeman, I have him 5, talent acquisitions is at a high level, show that he can overcome some of those mistakes. He's probably had more bad losses than any coach on here, and as far as teams that he lost to, Stanford, Marshall, and then Northern Illinois this year. But he's also had some of the bigger wins that we've seen on this list. He's shown that he can kind of not make the same mistake twice. He's made some great hires, and he also, compared to some of these coaches, isn't working with some of the same resources that they had. And I don't think the foundation he inherited is as strong as people make it out to be. I've argued this for a long time. It's not like he inherited a bad situation. He didn't inherit like 35 scholarship players like Kelly did at LSU, but he didn't walk in. People say, well, he inherited a better situation than Brian Kelly did. He inherited a better situation based on what Jack Swarbrick did for the program. He didn't inherit a better roster, because the roster that Brian Kelly inherited has 2 NFL Hall of Famers on it. I mean, that's what he walked in the door with already there. And I'm not even including Manti and Michael Floyd and Tyler Eifert and Kyle Rudolph and Chris Watt and Capron Lewis Moore. I mean,
Lewis Nix
got recruited before. Lewis Nix came into Notre Dame before he even hired a coach. So the better part of what Marcus Freeman inherited was better because of what Jack Swarbrick did. Now, the success was better. There was a track record of success was better, but 3 years before Brian Kelly took over, they went 3-9. 3 years before Marcus Freeman took over, 4 years before Marcus Freeman took over, they went 4-8. So it's not this giant thing. They had a better track record of success, but the roster that Brian Kelly inherited was better than the roster that Marcus Freeman inherited. And some of the good things that we did see from Marcus Freeman was some of the young players that he recruited, Benjamin Morrison and that class. So, but at the end of the day, still the thing that keeps Marcus Freeman behind Dabo, and I'll explain why he's behind the other 3, is because of the most recent head-to-head and the fact that I just need to see a little bit more of it. Dabo, the last 4-5 years, has gone 50-16. Marcus Freeman's gone 33-9. Last 3 years, Dabo's gone 30-11. Marcus has gone 33-9. I just feel like Coach Freeman has too many of those bad losses for me to say, and including the most recent head-to-head, you got outplayed from start to finish by a team that you should have beat. Just a team that had a worse record than you, a team that was missing 8 starters for that game. Like that was just a bad loss. And so if they would have won that game, then this is an easy flip for me. Very easy flip for me. And I predict that we're going to see Coach Freeman be ahead of him next year, but we need to see that first. Here's my top 3, Shaun. Number 3 is Kalen DeBoer. And yes, this year for Alabama was not good. I would argue that the team he inherited at Alabama, for all the talk about the talent, the team he inherited at Alabama was not as good at the 2 positions where it needed to be, that are most important to his success as what he had at Washington. He did not have a better receiving core at Alabama than what he had at Washington, and he did not have a better quarterback at Alabama than what he had at Washington. And I think there was a need for a transition at that position that he's going to have to overcome. And he gets knocked a little bit for that, for me, to be completely honest with you. But not enough to have him fall behind Dabo or Marcus Freeman or Dan Lanning or anybody else, because even his down year was 9-4. The thing that did give me some pause, Shaun, it's not that they lost 4 games. It's not the record. It's how they lost and who they lost to. But I can't put him behind Marcus Freeman because his bad losses to a Vanderbilt team that made a bowl game, where Marcus Freeman the same year lost to Northern Illinois, lost to a really bad Stanford team in his first year at Notre Dame, and then lost to Marshall. So I can't put Coach Freeman above him. He also has played for a national title and beat Steve Sarkisian to get there, and also it's not just that he went 9-4 at Bama. He went 25-3 in 2 years of Washington. He inherited a 4-8 team at Washington. 4-8, and immediately turned him into a 25-3 team. And his last year at Fresno, they went 9-3. And the only reason, so Kalen DeBoer has 46 wins in the last 5 years. The only reason it's even that few is because they had that COVID shortened season in 2020, his first year there. Being inherited a Fresno team that went 4-8. Then they have the COVID year, and then they go 9-3. So, like, to me, that's where I'm at. I think this guy's done a phenomenal job in his tenure as a head football coach. I think he's done a brilliant job, and I think that they're recruiting very well right now. And it's about kind of taking that next step as a program. So 25-3 at Washington when you inherit a 4-8 team is really impressive. Now he is in a year, Shaun, where he's either gonna go up or down. This is a big year for him. So I think what you did is you put your concerns into this year's ranking. I'm holding off for a year before I allow them to affect my ranking. Like that. I don't think we disagree a lot on Kalen DeBoer's resume. I think that you just allowed this most recent season to impact your ranking a little bit more than I did, because to me, there's some success that trumps this one down year. And I know we look at the talent he had, but they also lost a lot of talent from that Bama team. So I'm not quite ready to ding him yet, but if they're not back in the playoffs this year, he's going down on my list. Because year 2 in this portal era, I don't want to hear any excuses about what you inherited. None at all. Kurt Cignetti just went 11-2 in Indiana. I don't want to hit into because of the portal. I don't hear any crying and whining about how long it takes to turn your team around. That's why I don't have a lot of sympathy for Brian Kelly and talk about what they inherited. It's a portal era. You should have been better by year 3. So that's kind of where I'm at. And then number 2, Ryan Day. Number 1, Kirby Smart. People can hate on Ryan Day all they want. I despise the guy. And you could argue that maybe he's overrated, this or that. But here's the reality, guys. To say whatever you want about him. The 1-4 against Michigan and all those things are why he's not number 1. But nobody else has a better resume. And you can say what you want. Well, this team, they went 14-2 this year, 11-2 the year before that, 11-2 the year before that, 11-2 the year before that, and 7-1 the year before that, and 13-1 the year before that. Right? The knock we had is, hey, I think he's a great offensive mind, but he's not a championship caliber coach. Well, guys, he just won a freaking championship. What else does he need to prove to you? Yes, he's a D-bag. I'm not going to deny that. He is. I don't like him as a person. But you can't sit there and say that he didn't push all the right buttons they needed to push this year after that Michigan loss. It's a bad loss. Real bad loss. But look what they did the next 4 games. You can't dismiss that. You can't criticize him for that and then not hold Marcus Freeman accountable for losses to Northern Illinois this year. You can't then not hold Kalen DeBoer accountable for a loss to Oklahoma and Vanderbilt this year and UCLA and Arizona State in his first year at Washington. You can't hold him to that standard and not look at Dan Lanning losing 49-3. I mean, every coach has a black eye on their resume, except maybe Kirby. Like, he's got some losses, but I don't know that Kirby has any black eyes. I think the teams he lost to this year had better players than he did. You know, I mean, Ole Miss had better players. Notre Dame had better players. Alabama had better players. That's the other thing that helps Kalen DeBoer too, is he did have a win over Kirby this year, which helps a little bit. But anyway, the point is, Shaun, is Ryan Day is 54-9 the last 5 years. He's been in the playoff 3 times the last 5 years, and he's won a national championship. Dislike the guy you want. I'm there with you, but he's got to be in the top 2. Reason I don't have Day ahead of Kirby Smart is because this 1 year doesn't trump the overall program. If Ryan Day had a roster like Kirby Smart had this year, he has no chance at going to the college football playoffs. None. He had to push all those right buttons and hope that some other, to get into the playoffs with the best roster in college football. Like, so that's where I get some of the pushback, but he still did get them going when they needed to get going and won the championship. But that team had no business losing 2 games. Kirby Smart does not lose 2 games with that roster. It's simple as that for me. And Kirby's got 2 rings. Ohio State has none, or has 1, and he's 1-0 head-to-head against Ryan Day. Kirby being number 1, as much as I dislike him, is the easiest one of all these. Ryan Day being number 2 was the second easiest of all that. After that, there's some uncertainty there, Shaun. So that's my 10. Let's get into it. Let's finish up by discussing some of this, Shaun. What was the one that made you have the biggest, like, whoa, okay. Explain that one to me, please.
No, I don't have a whoa. Explain it to me. Dabo's a better coach than Ryan Day to me. He's just a better coach. I've seen him outcoach Nick Saban twice in national championship games. And Ryan Day just got smacked by a new coach at Michigan. Like, yeah, he got things done, but it's like just looking at like when it matters.
He did beat Dabo the last time they played each other. Blew him out.
He did. Right. And to be fair, Dabo has had two transcendent quarterbacks that could take over games and carry a team. So, but Ryan Day hasn't had bums at quarterback during his time at Ohio State. He's had some pretty darn good quarterbacks. I think he's going to have a pretty good young quarterback this year. With all of that being said, you talking about full resume, you give the recent bias to Ryan Day. Full resume, just looking at who they are as coaches and what they do as coaches against other great coaches in big time situations, I lean towards Dabo. And I am, you know me, we've had conversations where I let Dabo have it.
Like, you're no Dabo apologist by any stretch.
No, by any stretch of the imagination. I just give him the nod over Ryan Day, even with the recent championship from Ryan Day.
Can I push back on that just for a second? Because I am a Dabo guy. I do like Dabo Sweeney a lot. And I despise Ryan Day in a lot of ways. But the reality is Dabo didn't win a title till year 9 with a transcendent quarterback. Yes, Ryan Day's had some great quarterbacks, but the team he won a title with didn't have a great quarterback.
No.
It had Will Howard. And not only the head-to-head, but if you look at the success that Dabo had, it took Dabo a long time to get there. So if you're going to talk about entire track record, that's a tough one to look at because Ryan Day hasn't coached nearly as long as Dabo. So when I talk about entire resume, I then try to look at it this way, Shaun, and it's different than yours. It's totally fine. I'm just explaining where I'm coming from. So if you're going to say, okay, look at the entirety of their resumes, well, you can't punish a guy who's only coached for 7 years against a guy that's coached for 17 years. So what did they do in their first 7? Where was Ryan Day and Dabo through their first 7? And it's not even close. I mean, Dabo almost got fired at one point in time. Now, he also didn't replace Urban Meyer, inherit the great situation, so that's a counter too. But the guy's gone 13-1, 7-1, 11-2, 11-2, 11-2, and 14-2. Where when you look at Dabo's success at Clemson, he didn't have his first 10-win season till his fourth year, and in that year they gave up 70 in the Orange Bowl to West Virginia in a loss. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't really until year 5 with Taj Boyd that they started to turn it around. With Ryan Day, by year 5, they had been into the playoffs twice and had a win over Dabo. So as much as it pained me to say, I had to take away some of that long-term success with Dabo. And honestly, the reason Dabo is even 4th for me is because of the consideration. His last 5 years have been very solid, but that's it, just solid. And to the point where, like, we're giving him credit for only losing by 14 to Texas.
I didn't give him credit for that. You give him credit for that? As a
fan base, like I do. Okay. Like when I look at this Clemson team, I'm like, look, they battled their butts off in that game. Like, Texas was 3-4 touchdowns better. They played their butts off and made that game closer than it should have been. So I give them credit for that. But that's where Clemson has fallen to, in my opinion, is that because like 3-4 years ago, I wouldn't have given them credit for a 14-point loss at Texas. And the other thing that hurts Dabo a little bit too when it comes to, and this is something that made me think about putting Coach Freeman ahead of him, is they got beat by all the good teams they played this year, if we're being honest. And they lost to Georgia. They lost to South Carolina. They lost to, well, except until the SMU game, they lost to Texas and Louisville. I mean, everybody else they played was not nearly in their league except for SMU, and then they won that game. Mm-hmm. But that's another knock on Dabo that has him a little bit lower for me. And it's just that recent record. But it's hard to disassociate yourself from the fact that the guys won 2 freaking titles. It is hard to disassociate yourself.
Let me ask you a question. This is really not even about Dabo. This is about Ryan Day. Based upon your rankings, give me the head coach that Ryan Day beat that was better than him.
Marcus Freeman.
I can speak
I'm
to
with you.
that.
I'm with
I can
you.
speak to Dabo beating coaches that are better than him.
Dabo. If you think Dabo's better, then he's beating Dabo.
No, I said upon your list.
Yeah.
Based upon your list.
Well, the only coach he could have gone against that's better than him is Kirby Smart, and he only lost by a point when they played against each other.
Now, give me the coaches, the disappointing losses for both. Now let's say that. This is my point. This is my point. He's yet to beat an elite top. You want to say Dabo? I think Ohio State had the better team that year. That's just my opinion.
2020? Yeah, I'd argue that. Although they didn't get a chance to play as many games, which they weren't as, that factors in too.
And it was an
outlier. Played 5 games.
Right. So just remove that. Give me the game where he went in against a superior team or head coach and won. Ryan Day.
Yeah.
This is where, because you talked about.
I understand that, but like
Dabo, what he walked into was a totally different situation than what Ryan Day inherited. Yeah. Totally different. So you talk about what Dabo did his first 4 seasons, he was building almost from
7
scratch.
Yeah.
Jim Harbaugh is, dude, you were born on third base. Like, I don't even respect you.
He's absolutely right on that.
And Jim Harbaugh didn't say anything because he smacked him for 4 straight years or 3 straight years. So Jim Harbaugh can say that. I just battled with Ryan Day because I have not seen him out-coach a team or coach that is considered better. Can he beat the teams? Can he beat the teams that he's supposed to beat? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Here's my thing. Here's my counter to that.
He's third. You got him. You got a second. I got him third.
We're not having a huge. You're not like you don't have him ninth. We're in. It's a fair thing to say.
Yeah.
Here's my counter to that, Shaun. Is part of being a head coach is recruiting and building your roster. Mm-hmm. And you could use that. To me, that argument would have held a lot more water in years 1, 2, and 3 of Ryan Day's tenure when he was still coaching Urban Meyer's team.
Right.
Year 5 and 6 and 7, he's not coaching Urban Meyer's team anymore.
No.
And to get like to this title, you say, well, to say the only way he could have beat anybody better. Well, when you're ranked 2, that list is small. You've only faced that guy ahead of you 1 time in the last 5 years, and that guy beat you by a point. You missed a field goal at the end of the game, and I would argue that guy had a better roster than you did. You just had the best player in the field that day.
I still expanded it. Take it away from your list.
I'm going to build on that. I'm going to build on that. So, but if you look at like top 10. He's won in the last 5 years. He's 1-0 against Dabo. Mm-hmm. He's 3-0 against Marcus Freeman. He's 1-1 against Dan Lanning. I don't think they faced Sark. Oh no, 1-0 against Sark. He's undefeated against James Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
Has not faced Brian Kelly, and he's 1-0 against Kurt Signetti. He has 1 loss against the top 10 coaches in this list. He's got 2 losses, and he's a whole bunch of wins. Like my counter to that would be
who wasn't he supposed to be?
You're punishing him for building a better team.
I'm not punishing him. This is the same thing. When you have great coaches, it is razor thin, and you have to go based upon what you do against the best of the best. I've seen Dabo go up against the best of the best when he didn't necessarily have the best. He wasn't the better coach, and he wasn't considered to have the better roster at that point.
I think in 16 and 18 he did have a better roster than Alabama.
That's debatable. Well, there's no question he wasn't the better head coach.
Definitely 18. He wasn't the best head coach, but you're also comparing that to the greatest coach of
that's who we had to go up against.
But again, so he's gone. So of every coach under him, not named Kirby Smart, in the last 5 years, he's beat. Again, him and Dabo, that's your 2-3, right? He's 1-0 against Dabo in the last 5 years. And I think it was like, 49-28? It wasn't even close. Like, blew them out. Yes, they had a better team. Well, yeah, I mean, and they played like an even better team. And Dabo still had Trevor Lawrence on that team. He beat Trevor Lawrence with Justin Fields. I think we would both agree there's a pretty big difference between Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence. He also beat that team with Travis Etienne. You know what I mean? So he had the better running back that day too. So he beat Clemson.
Well, I think Justin Fields' team was more talented than that Clemson team, but
sure,
in my opinion.
But I'm saying he wasn't better at the important spots that everybody's running, quarterback, running back. that was still a talented Clemson team. But again, if you're going to compare it to the top 10, so if you look at like Dabo is not he's 0-1. He got blown out this year by Kirby Smart. Dabo is 0-1 against Ryan Day. I don't believe Dabo was coach against Kalen DeBoer in that 5-year period. He's 1-1 against Marcus
recently.
Freeman. Yeah. I don't think he's faced the teams that he's been at, but he hasn't faced him directly. He's 1-1 against Marcus Freeman, has the most recent win. So I'll give him that. He has not coached against Dan Lanning. Yeah.
That record against Marcus Freeman is I think it works against him and then works for him, right?
Yeah.
Because he beats Notre Dame missing 9 starters.
With an inferior roster.
Yes. Yeah. And then he has a better roster against a depleted Notre Dame with their backup quarterback and walks in and gets blasted.
Blown out.
Blown out. So that kind of cancels each other out. Yeah.
Yeah. Dan Lanning hasn't coached against. Sarkisian, he's 0-1 against. James Franklin, he hasn't coached against. Brian Kelly, he's 1-1 against Brian Kelly during this stretch. And then he has not coached against Curt Cignetti. So his record against the other top 10 coaches is not very good. Whereas Ryan Day is 0-1 against Kirby, but he is against Kalen DeBoer. He has not coached against Kalen DeBoer. He is 3-0 against Marcus Freeman, 1-1 against Lanning. He's 1-0 against Sarkisian. He's 5-0 against James Franklin. And he has not coached against Brian Kelly, and he's 1-0 against Curt Cignetti. Like, the record against the other top coaches is significantly better than Dabo's in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And now where Dabo had that argument, Shaun, was if we were having this conversation in 2020 after Ryan Day beat him that year, it's like, so it doesn't matter. He's still the better coach than Ryan Day because he's beat Saban. He has beaten Brian Kelly. He has beaten Urban Meyer. He has beaten, he had beaten all the top coaches back then. Beat Urban Meyer in the Orange Bowl, beat Ryan Day in 19. And in 19, I would argue Ohio State had a better team than in 19, Ohio State had the better roster and Clemson beat them. In 20, Ohio State had the better roster and Clemson got dominated.
Right.
But 19 doesn't carry as much weight for me because now we're kind of in that more recent 5-year stretch where that game's not part of the conversation. And that was Ryan Day's first year as a head coach. So I want to move on from this topic because it makes me like skin crawl that I'm defending Ryan Day. It just makes me want to.
No, it's not. It's not like you said. You're talking about the razor thin, objective conversations to have that could differentiate between one guy and the other without making it seem like I don't like this person. Like I got Ryan Day at 3. Like
right. We're talking who's the greatest who's the greatest player in the 80s, Magic or Bird? I mean, it's like, okay, they're the best, but we can debate who we think is better. Explain to me why you don't have why you don't have Brian Kelly in your top 10.
Well, I think we had the conversation last week. Like it has nothing to do with Notre Dame. It's like you can't tell me, basically, let me paraphrase, you can't tell me that you're being held back by your former employer. That's basically what you said. I was held back by my former employer. And then go underwhelm at the place that supposedly gave you a better chance to do what the other employer couldn't give you the opportunity to do. Right? If that's the case, you've had 3 years to show that what you said is true and you haven't. So now to me, it's like, okay, did you win because did you win because of Notre Dame? Like now I have to question. You tried to make it seem like Notre Dame was holding you back. I'm looking at LSU. You're underwhelming with.
And we've both said that, Shaun. We've both said that Notre Dame gave him more resources than he thinks he had, but he would always make excuses for why.
That's all I'm saying. The things that couldn't be done, another coach from a recruiting standpoint came in and said and showed, yes, you can do this at Notre Dame. So now I'm starting to question even your tenure at Notre Dame even more. Like, because you gave excuses of why certain things couldn't be done, and someone has come in and shown that it can be done. So I don't just say that without having, Matt Campbell for me is someone that you can scrutinize that. That's just me having respect for what he's been able to do because he had some disappointing seasons. He's had some 6-win seasons, 5-win seasons, so you can push back. But I'll be honest. I can argue and sit here, Because to me, the same thing has happened. I think Lincoln Riley is underwhelmed in the last 2 seasons. But if we go back 2 years ago, I would probably have Lincoln Riley ranked ahead of Brian Kelly if this was 2 years ago. If coming off of the Caleb Williams Heisman season, I probably have Lincoln Riley, his success at Oklahoma, his first season at USC.
I wouldn't have, but I understand why you would have.
You understand what I'm saying?
It would have been, Shaun, it would have been very debatable. You know that I've never loved, I always felt like Lincoln Riley's success. Like, here's the difference between Lincoln Riley and
He inherited, he was born on third base as well.
100%. And his teams always went down the longer he was there, where Ryan Day at least kept going what Urban did, and then eventually kind of got him back to the promise.
That's where he needs to go. Absolutely.
Right. And to your point, at that time, though, he's coming off a 10-win season after 10-win season. He's been in the playoffs multiple times. Yeah, it's very fair. He probably would have been in the top 10, Shaun. I think the debate with Lincoln Riley back then would have been, where in the top 10 do you want to have him? Some people would have had him top 5. I'd have had him like 8 to 10.
Yeah.
Fair.
And then I think you said this, I think guys like, if he doesn't get it done this year, speaking of Brian Kelly,
he's out.
You had him at 9, right?
I had him at 9, yeah.
Yeah.
And barely.
I can see Mike Elko and Kenny Dillingham definitely jumping him and getting in the top 10 list.
I could see Brom jumping back.
Absolutely.
I could see him jumping back over him. I could see Dillingham if they have another 10-win season. I could see Lance Leopold jumping back in. I could see I mean, I don't have Matt Campbell in. And yeah, Matt Campbell did a great job this year, but I don't think what Matt Campbell did the 4 previous years was anything abnormal for Iowa State. That's my big knock on him, because like in the last 5 years, Iowa has more 10-win seasons than Iowa State does. In the last 5 years, they've gone 9-3, 7-6, 4-8, 7-6, 11-3. And my other knock on Matt Campbell is he is someone who has shown when there's no pressure on his team, they end up overachieving. But that stretch where they struggled, nobody's. But the couple of years before that, there were high expectations on his teams, and they disappointed. Like they did. I mean, they disappointed. They underachieved, and at Iowa State, not just underachieved compared to what Brian Kelly did at LSU, but underachieved based on what your expectations were for your program coming in. I need to see Matt Campbell have a back-to-back season, just like the same reason I dropped Lance Leopold down and don't have him in, because if you reverse, they're 25, they're 23 and 24s, like Lance Leopold did a heck of a job in 2023 and 2022, or, even to go 6-6 there when you consider the absolute train wreck he inherited, but he couldn't build on it this year. Even if he'd gone 8-4, he might have still been in my top. He might have been in my top 10, but I just need to see a little bit more from Iowa State before I can kind of jump in to say he's top 10. And so, like, yes, all those things are true about I'm going to mute you for a second, Shaun, while you're clicking that. But I would argue that Matt Campbell did a much better job coaching this 24 team at Iowa State than Brian Kelly did coaching this 24 team at LSU. That's not even debatable. The issue that I have is just the 3 previous years weren't good. He's got 2 good bookend seasons of this 5-year stretch, 9-3 in year 1, and then 11-2 this past year. But the way they got destroyed by Arizona State in the Big 12 title game rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. And the fact that they so underachieved the 3 previous years. Now, if he goes 9-3, 10-2 again this year, then we can have that conversation. But say what you want about Brian Kelly, his worst year in the last 5 years is 9-4. And that's after replacing a Heisman Trophy winner and losing 2 elite receivers to the NFL. I mean, like, I'm not making excuses for the guy, but I think the 5-year track record of Brian Kelly's been in the playoff in the last 5 years. Took that 2020 Notre Dame team. He had a Heisman Trophy winner. Like, this is what is going on today, Shaun. I've literally today defended Ryan Day and Brian Kelly. Something's going on, right? Like, I need to go have a talk with my wife. I think she might have spiked my drink or something.
No, but that's why you can't refute his record.
It's
can't.
The relative nature of where they're at.
When you say, once again, basically, I was held back.
Oh yeah,
by my former employer, and where I'm headed is going to give me the best. It's really going to show how good I am as a coach. Where I'm going. Mm-hmm. I'm waiting for the manifestation of that.
Yeah,
because some of the same questions that we're hearing from LSU media and fan base, we're sitting here saying we told you.
Yeah, because we
actually
told people that.
Yes.
There's a lot of people want to claim we tried to tell you. No, you didn't, because you were ripping me back then when he was at Notre Dame. So not only want to hear this, we tried to tell you. No, you didn't. We did. We did try to tell you, but the product is still good every year. That's my point. Is he hasn't had the up and downs that a lot of other coaches that are on this list are having. And when I mean up and downs, it's not relative saying, well, he went 10-3 and Matt Campbell went 7-6. So he's better. No, it's how did you perform relative to expectations of where you should have been? And I think that Brian Kelly's disappointing seasons have not been as disappointing as some of Matt Campbell's recent disappointing seasons. And that's kind of where I'm coming from on this one, Shaun, is I think both of them had disappointing seasons, but Brian Kelly's still been more consistent. Whereas Iowa State's been up and down, and we've seen Iowa State have coaches that were able to be consistent. Dan McCarney was consistent for a while, and then also Glenn Mason had some consistent level of success. I just need to see him kind of bounce back and be able to have more consistency. I think Matt Campbell's a heck of a football coach, and next year there's going to be more pressure on his football team. That's when he's going to answer a big question for me. Is now that there's going to be pressure on you again, how can you say, Shaun, let's talk. Any other questions about my list?
I'm just saying, like, as far as to finish this off, has nothing to do with, I don't need LSU fans. You still question about recruiting? That was a question in Notre Dame. Hires, coaches, and still question the LSU. But you were supposed to be going to a better place. It's
offensively, I did like the defensive hire he made last year, but I do question his offensive hires. Yeah,
can't seem to figure defense out. Right? Same questions, which means tell me what's changed. Because you've changed locations, but the same questions follow you. The same questions. And we didn't need to hear anything from LSU.
Any of that. Don't disagree with any of that. That's why he's not my top five. Because as I said earlier, the thing about it is if you look at the last 5 years, Brian Kelly's tied for third in total wins. But I have ninth. Why? Because I think there's a lot of hollow wins in there. Like that's the thing. And he's underachieved more often. You got 50 wins, but you should have 56. That kind of thing. But I still say that's still better than all but 8 other football coaches in college football. I do think that's going to change. He doesn't. I'll say this: if he doesn't take LSU to the college football playoffs this year, he's going to drop down. As long as other coaches continue to do certain things, he's going to drop on my list. He's going to absolutely drop on my list. Let's talk about as we wrap things up, Shaun. We talked about some coaches that have missed a list. I want to talk about a couple guys that we talked: Lance Leopold, Jeff Brom, Kyle Whittingham. But here's a couple coaches that I think are very underrated, who another big season by should vault them into some of these conversations. There's some other coaches that are, Deion Sanders is to me, he's got a lot more to prove. This was a heck of a year for them, but they were terrible the year before. And I got to see it more than 2 years at this level. Same thing with a guy like Kenny Dillingham. Yes, last year was great, but you were terrible the year before that. And I got to see just a longer track record because we're not overhyping one season. But I'll tell you, Coach Shaun, that I have my eye on that I think is one of the might be the most underrated coach, and I'm gonna lead into it because I want there to be a little bit of a building to this, and I want to see your reaction. But I'm gonna tell you right now, a guy that if he can go out there this year and have a double-digit win season, I will pound on the table for being a top 10 quarterback because he wins with everything that Brian Kelly whined about Notre Dame is exactly true at this school. Small place, hard to recruit there, don't have great resources, academics are tough, institution of faith. I think you know where I'm going with this one, but yet still goes out there and wins. Kalani Sitake is the most underrated coach right now in college football. In the last 5 years, he has 3 seasons with 10 or more wins. He went 11-1, 10-3, 8-5, 5-7, and this year they were 11-2, and I think they were the best team in the Big 12 this year. They didn't win the stupid tiebreakers, but they were the best team in the Big 12 this year. If it wasn't for the 5-7 season in 2023, I might have him number 10 on my list. I really might. The job he's done at BYU, where they do have all those issues, it is not easy to recruit to BYU. Not easy at all. And that guy, and you can say, well, look, I don't give him enough credit, as much credit for the 11-1 in 2020 because that schedule was soft. But he's BYU, the 10-3 the next year. Yes, but you're still a group of 5 schedule that year when they went 10-3. But they still beat Arizona. They weren't in the Big 10 yet or Big 12 yet, but they beat Arizona, beat Utah, beat Arizona State, beat Washington State, beat Virginia, beat USC. But then they had the bad loss to UAB in the bowl game, and they lost to Boise State and Baylor. But like, that was a Power 5 schedule that year. So in the last 4 years, he's had 2 years with a Power 5 schedule. He's won 10 or more games. This past year, they went 11-2. And so again, that first year in the Big 12, a lot of people use that as confirmation by, see, he's not that good of a coach. They finally played a real schedule and they went 5-7. Well, look what they did now. This last year, 11-2, including beating a playoff team on the road. Like, they went to SMU and beat SMU last year, who was a playoff team. So I'm very high on the job that he has done. Obviously, Kenny Dillingham beat him late in the year. But I'll tell you right now, I think he is one of the most, if not the most, underrated coach in college football. And they absolutely obliterated Colorado and Deion Sanders in that bowl game. I don't put a whole lot into that one because no Shador, no Travis Hunter. Whatever. But I'm really curious to see what Kalani Sitake can do. Can he build on last year? Because you're talking about a guy that's not in our top 10 that has 3 seasons of 10 or more wins in the last 5 years. That guy's doing a heck of a job right there. And that's a hard place to recruit. There's no harder place to recruit in the Big 12, in my opinion, than BYU. And they just went 11-2. So he is my most underrated coach that is knocking on the door at this list. And there's some other guys we talked about. Who's
BYU
that coach?
Must have some new money. They've been sporting a lot of new money in basketball and football. I don't know what's happening. They're getting 5-star recruits in basketball, and 4-star recruits in football.
They got the number 1 player in the country coming in basketball, right?
Yeah. I got to see, man.
What are your thoughts on
investment is?
Yeah. I love. What are your thoughts on Sitake, and then who would be that guy for you?
Sitake, I have 4 guys that, in my opinion, bear watching. I had Sitake, I had Mike Elko, Kenny Dillingham, and someone said in the chat, and this is outside of like my alumni connection.
Yeah.
But I think Brent Bielema has shown at Wisconsin. He had that stumble when he went to the SEC. Yeah. Probably should have stayed in the Big 10. That's his fit. Right. Bad fit. But what he's doing at Illinois, what they did against South Carolina in that bowl game, and with the team, I think it's going to be fast. And I'm telling you, September 20th.
And Shaun, they did not have a very talented team at all this year. This team didn't have near the talent they had 2 years ago. Like 22.
The team 2 years ago that lost that close game on the road against Michigan, where the game was stolen, but I'll leave that alone. But Brett Bielema is he's a really good coach. I don't think he's yet to have a Wisconsin or Illinois that defining win to now to grab the attention. September 20th is the game to watch when Indiana goes to Illinois. That's going to be a fascinating game to watch. I can't wait to see Cignetti versus Bielema in that matchup.
That's a lot of machismo in that football game, Shaun.
It is.
That's a lot of attitude. That's a lot of ego on the two sidelines.
That's the game. See, when Cignetti was talking crazy and Marcus Freeman is not the type to respond.
Yeah.
Brett Bielema's the type to respond.
Oh, yeah. I actually think the game the next week, because I think if they go on the road and lose to a really good Indiana team, I don't think that tells me that he's not a top 10 coach, because he lost on the road to a top 10 coach who's got a really good roster. I think a better roster than what Illinois has. Yeah. I think the game the next week when USC comes to town is the one that could really.
Oh yeah,
like you got to beat Duke, you got to beat Western Michigan, you got to beat Purdue, you got to beat Rutgers, you got to beat Maryland, you got to beat Northwestern, those type of teams. But to me, it's that you've got to be competitive against Ohio State at home, and you've got to beat USC at home. I think that's a big one for me, Shaun. That because I think the way their schedule sets up is if they can win that game, now they're setting up for another 9-10 win season, and that could be the thing that you could vault him there. I don't put as much into the Wisconsin stuff as you do because it's been a while. But the reason that I thought this was a good hire is if you actually go look at those Wisconsin teams that were really good, they recruited Illinois a lot back then, a lot. And I think this is a base where it's back to recruiting the type of kid and the type of schools that he recruited from at Wisconsin. I think it's a style of play that still better fits what he's trying to do. But yeah, it's a big year for him. And the guy he beat in a bowl game, it's a big year for Shane Beamer. I don't think Shane Beamer right now sniffing the top 10. But Shane Beamer, with a good season at South Carolina, could vault himself into that top 15 to 20 conversation, where then another good year vault him into the top 10. But but Bielema's a good one, Shaun. I had a feeling you were going to go there with that one. Trevor asked Shaun, he asked about Josh Heupel. He said, where would you rank Josh Heupel? 30-9 since 2012, Orange Bowl win in 2022, beat Dabo, made the playoffs this past season, got stomped, definitely not top 10, but where does he potentially move up? I have him in that top 15 to 18 range just because he has had success. I think that he showed that he can win in different ways. You know, where how they won in 22 is completely different how they won in 24. But here's why Josh Heupel is right now not sniffing my top 10, because Josh Heupel has shown he can put good offenses on the field. He's shown he can win to a degree, but he's not shown he can maximize the potential of his football team, and he's also not shown me that he can control a roster in this era. When you look at how his teams have fallen apart and how his teams have kind of been a little bit more about themselves than the team. I mean, they collapsed late in 2022. That great team, that season kind of got ruined by just collapsing down the stretch and just choking that game away against South Carolina, hearing about all the locker room fights and stuff that are NIL related. You look at how the team finished this season. I'm not saying they should have beat Ohio State. They shouldn't have beat Ohio State. But they weren't even competitive, Shaun. And those things concern me. Yes, he had a good year this year. Honestly, Trev, I don't give him as much credit for this year's season. I give him credit, but not as much as I would in past years, because I think the SEC was down. So an 11-2 season this year, or 10-3 season this year, doesn't mean as much to me as what a 10-3 season would have meant maybe in 2021, when I thought the league was better. So he's a guy that if they can have that one really good kick down the door, we've arrived moment, like he has a good win over Bama and DeBoer. This is the worst Bama team we've seen in several years, talent-wise and such. They have yet to beat Georgia. Or no, they beat.
He has 2 wins over Bama, right? He beat Saban.
Beat him in 22 as well.
He beat Saban.
Yep.
Yeah.
But they're often not competitive against Georgia, and that's a bit of a concern for me as well. So,
is that more about culture?
Yes.
Than it is talent. Like getting in those
game day coaching, I think he's pretty good. I think he's a good football coach. I think he recruits well. I think that he's shown he can win with different styles. Like I said, how they won in 22 is way different than how they won in 24. All those things mean a lot to me, Shaun. But part of being a great head football coach, and this is why Brian Kelly's not in the top 5, is because of, can you build the type of program where your foundation is such that you can get the most out of your roster. And you can use culture, whatever you want to use. That is a big concern of me that I have for him. Big concern I have for him. He's got to take that next step for me.
Those 2 road games at Georgia, they have pretty much outplayed Georgia for the first half. And then when Kirby adjusted, they had nothing to go to with 2 different teams. They were 2 totally different teams.
Got out coached.
In both of those games, they got out coached. So that goes directly to Josh Heupel. He has to answer the bell. I don't know if it's something. It's definitely not talent, because they've shown that they can outplay Georgia. But when Georgia responds, or when another coach responds, what are you going to do? What's your counter to that? Right?
Yeah.
So that's the next step.
He's got some wins over teams in the top 10. I mean, he's got got a win over Kalen DeBoer. He's got a blowout win over Brian Kelly. It's just they got some bad losses, and that culture part concerns me a little bit. Another guy, somebody said that Matt Rule being the top 10 next year at this time, book it. The only way Matt Rule's in the top 10 next year is if they go to the semifinals of the championship game. Like you got to have more than one good year to be on the list. Like I would argue that this Nebraska team underachieved big time for what they should have been. So unless you're talking about Nebraska making a run into the playoff, like not just getting to the playoffs, but making a run, like a win or 2 in the playoffs, no. No,
I
I'm not. I'm
mean,
not
yeah,
going
you
with that.
know, Nebraska was flying high until a certain team came into Lincoln. You know,
Beat them at Lincoln. They
I'm
actually
just saying.
recovered. They actually recovered from that win, though, Sean, and had a good win after that, right? I mean, didn't they win 2 or 3 more after that? But that was the first time you saw the flaws in that team. They beat Purdue the next week in an ugly game. They beat Rutgers in an ugly game, and then they lost 4 of their next 5, and just got blown out by Indiana. Choked a game away against Ohio State. Got beat at home by UCLA. Terrible loss. Lost to USC. Lost at Iowa. He's going to have to prove a lot more to me. And again, I'm not saying Nebraska won't be good this year, Andrew. I actually think Nebraska will be good this year. I'm saying I need more than one good year to overcome the fact that I think they underachieved this past season. Because like you said, I mean, let's be honest, Sean. Take coaching out of it. Just compare the two teams. Illinois should not have gone on the road and beat Nebraska this year. You want to just compare rosters,
Not this
compare
team.
talent. They should not have been able to go to Nebraska and beat that football team. So you got to show me more than one. And that's my thing with Matt Campbell. And so to show consistency of my argument, Andrew, look at what I said about Matt Campbell. Great job this year. 11-2. You know, they win the Big 12 title. They're playing there in the college football playoffs. But because of previous disappointments, I got to just see it for a second year. So there's unless he wins a national championship or gets to the championship game, Matt Rule's not jumping to my top 10 until I see it for 2 years. That's where I need to see it. I think that's a fair, because like even Marcus Freeman, yeah, this year was great, but they did go 10-3 last year. You know, I mean, he does have a very good record against top 25 teams the last couple years. So that stuff kind of matters. Anybody else that you want to mention here, Sean, before here's a coach who should be in the top 10, or to me, I shouldn't say should be in the top 10. Let me think of the right way to
I was about to. I perked up.
Here's a coach that should be in the top 10 based on where he's been, the resources he had, but has been a dramatically underachieving coach. There is no reason that a guy that spent 20-21 at Oregon and 22-24 at Miami shouldn't be in this conversation. And he's not even sniffing this top 25 conversation, much less top 10. And that is Mario Cristobal. Yeah. How do you coach 5 years, 2 at Oregon, where you go 4-3, 10-3, and then you go to Miami, you go 5-7, 7-6, and 10-3, and that was one of the ugliest 10-3 seasons we've seen in a long time, because they had more talent than everybody they played, lost to inferior opponents, and they were a Superman performance from their quarterback away from losing 2 or 3 other games. That's a guy that to me is going to have to get things turned around real quickly, or the shine is going to be completely off of that one. That's Mario Cristobal. Rhett Lashley's another guy, Sean, that I think is a young coach that's been a head coach a couple years. He's got to show me one more good year. He may be in that conversation. I think Rhett Lashley's in the top 25 for me now. And not only the job he did this year, but they won 12 games year before that. I mean, he said, I just need to see it for one more year. And the way they finished their season was very disappointing for me. Not losing the last 2 games, but the way they lost them. I think they got out coached in both games. You know, but he's in my I got my eye on him. I got my eye on him list. Any comments on Mike Norvell was a question we were asked. Yeah, he's not sniffing the top 25 list. Mike Norvell had 2 good years in a row with a unique quarterback, and outside of that, he has been very mediocre the last 5 years. Like, I'm sorry, I don't care how much they lost from their football team. They lost this. This past year was one of the worst coaching jobs I've ever seen in my life. And here's the thing: Mike Norvell's been a head coach for 5 years. He has as many seasons with 3 or fewer losses than he has with 10 or more. He had a 3-6 and a 2-10 season and a 5-7 season. He had that nice 2-year run with 10-3 and 13-1. I would argue didn't have a lot of great wins in that stretch, because I mean the LSU wins were really good, but outside of that, not a lot else on there. You can't go 2-10 a year after going 13-1 and even be thinking about anyone thinking you're not even a top 10 coach in the ACC right now with the job you've done. Pat Narduzzi can win 7 games with that roster, but you can't win more than 2 with your roster? Really? Really? Bill O'Brien can take that BC team to a bowl game, but you can't beat them or get to a bowl game with your roster? That was one of the worst coaching jobs, along with 2016 at Notre Dame. One of the worst coaching jobs I've ever seen by a head football coach. Ever seen.
You know what? There are two SEC coaches. Somebody actually just said it, put it up in the chat. I do think Drinkowitz has a chance in the next year or two knocking on the door. As somebody that knocks on the door and then just all of a sudden dude, Mark Stoops will get Kentucky to a certain point and start knocking on the door, and then all of a sudden they'll just have this disappointing season, man. It's absolutely, because I respect the job he's done in Kentucky. Like, that's a hard place. He's made it a very hard place to play when you go into that stadium, and it hasn't been that. That's what it is right now. Even when they don't even have a great record, it's a hard place to play. Georgia struggled against them early. That was like the early signs that this Georgia team was different with that game against Kentucky, when Kentucky basically gave the game away late in the fourth
Georgia should have won that game.
Yeah.
Beat Ole Miss. They almost beat Georgia, beat Ole Miss, but then they went 4-8.
Absolutely. That's crazy.
Like, how?
And that was coming off of that close bowl game loss to Clemson.
And it comes a year, like an off season after you were rumored to be leaving. Like, that the kind of thing could really hurt your tenure there, because it's going to hurt. Well, why would I come for you, coach? You were about to leave a year ago. Like, well, I chose not to leave. No, you didn't, man. The money people vetoed your hire. You were agreed to the deal. You didn't back out. You didn't pull a Bob Stoops, who actually verbally agreed to take the head coaching job at Notre Dame for 2010 and then quickly backed out. I've been told that by a few people before Brian Kelly. But this one is one where you got Greg Schiano'd is what happened to you at Tennessee. That's what happened to you. He's a very frustrating coach. A lot of people in the chat have Lane Kiffin in the top 10. Unless we're like who can win, who can drink the most shots without passing out. Like, okay, he's probably my top 10 of that list. But like, what is Lane Kiffin doing on anyone's top 10 list? The last 5 years, he's gone 5-5, 10-3, 8-5, 11-2, and 10-3. And this 10-3 job he did this year was one of the most underwhelming 10-3. Like this team should have been competing for a playoff spot, and they didn't. Why, Shaun? Because they lost to 3 unranked football teams, including at home to a 4-8 Kentucky team, and then lost to an 8-5 Florida team with a true freshman quarterback. This team had no business being a 3-loss team this year. None.
Which I'll tip my cap, because I actually think for him to go out and get Chad Bowden is a great hire. Because he didn't need
Did I say Lincoln
keys.
Riley? I meant Lane Kiffin.
You said Lane. Okay.
I meant Lane Kiffin.
Riley.
Okay. Yeah, Lane Kiffin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now we can switch. Lane Kiffin, top 10.
Everything I just said was about the Ole Miss team, not right. My bad.
Okay. I think I heard that. If I didn't,
my fault.
My mistake. But Lane Kiffin, that's a totally different conversation. I could see him knocking on the door, but once again, he's in the same category as Brian Kelly with me. You know what I'm saying? But Brian Kelly has accomplished more and has actually won championships.
Including beating the best team like Brian Kelly's worst team of the last 5 years beat Lane Kiffin's best team of the last 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, it is if someone said Kiffin, I could actually understand why. See, I'm trying to contextualize it because it is Ole Miss. He has definitely raised the bar at a school that was not consistently in the upper echelon.
Not consistent. We've seen
years.
They
weren't consistently there. They've seen years.
David Cutt, but he hasn't been consistent either.
No, especially not with the talent that he accumulates.
This past 2 years was the first time he had back-to-back good seasons.
Yeah.
And his second good season, he went 10-3 with what I would argue is one of the better rosters in the SEC. That's my thing, Shaun, is that it's like we talked about this.
They shouldn't have lost to LSU. There's no way they should have lost to LSU.
Had no business. How do you beat Georgia and then lose the 3 games they lost to?
Yeah.
Like, that's
Kentucky, LSU, yeah. And you have to attribute that directly to coaching. You have to.
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah. Somebody just said that he's the only coach to ever win 10 games at Ole Miss. That's absolutely false. Like David Cutcliffe won 10 games with Eli Manning. And didn't Hugh Freeze also win 10 games at one point in time? But
With
David Cutcliffe absolutely had
Yes.
a 10-win season at Ole
Yes.
Miss. Yeah, and also,
Yes.
Hugh Freeze had one in 2015. So that's not true. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
great offensive
done
mind.
a great job.
Great offensive mind. I don't think they're getting a ton of support. It's not like he's winning without resources. They gave him a lot of money to put that roster together this past year. And I mean, they had a great D line, one of the best receiving corps in college football, pretty good quarterback, and then that's the thing that makes him not a good head coach, Shaun, or not a great head coach, Shaun, is you can't consistently get your team ready to play.
And why?
Him? Because they're just as immature as he is.
Mm.
You know, like you're out there doing these Twitter battles and you're acting like a fool and stuff like that. And then you wonder why your team can't be consistent. Why you don't show maturity and your team plays just like you.
Yeah.
It's not about you. Marcus Freeman is a very focused guy. He's young, but he's very focused and determined. And his team plays like him. You know, like that's my thing that yes, I do hold him accountable because when you can't get your team up ready to play Kentucky, whose fault is that? When you can't get your team, like we talk about, Tennessee just took Josh Heupel just took a Tennessee team to the college football playoff that, in my opinion, top to bottom is not close to the roster that Lane Kiffin had this year. Not close. In the same league. And not close to being as good. That tells me something. That tells me that, what would Josh Heupel have done with this year's roster at Tennessee, at Ole Miss? They're definitely in the playoffs. They definitely, are better than 9-3 in the regular season because we've seen him do that with comparable rosters in 2022, and then we saw him do that with an even worse roster in 2024. So that's where I'm at, is great offensive mind. And yes, he's elevated Ole Miss. I'm not going to deny that, but has he elevated him to the point where he's winning way beyond what that program is capable of? Which, think about this. Matt Campbell at Iowa State had a better record this year than with that roster, with Rocco Becht at quarterback, than what Ole Miss had this year with Jackson Dart, Walter Nolan, that really outstanding receiving corps. He went 10-3. And Lane and Matt Campbell went 11-2. Matt Campbell has a better case to make than Lane Kiffin. And again, they went out and gave him the money he needed to go out and put this roster together. But I do believe his immaturity bleeds into how his team plays. Yes. So he's inconsistent in his approach, things he does and says, his focus, and his team plays just like that. There's some weeks this year where I said, that's the last team I'd want to play in the playoffs. Literally, there's times this year where I'm like, Ole Miss is the worst matchup for Notre Dame of all the teams we've seen.
Mm.
Talented run-throw quarterback, big-time receiver core, big-time D-line. Secondary, you can be exposed, but Notre Dame doesn't have a team that can really expose that. But then you go and look and you see what other weeks you're like, Notre Dame would beat that team by 30. Whose fault is that? It's the head coach's fault. You're the one that can't get your team up week after week after week. Yeah, great job. You did a great job of getting your team to beat Georgia. It's wonderful. You did a nice job of getting your team ready to beat South Carolina on the road. Big time blowout. Wonderful. But you're also the same coach who lost at Florida. You're also the same coach who lost at home to Kentucky. You're also the same coach that literally got out-coached in the fourth quarter by Brian Kelly. So, yeah, I can't go there with you for people having the top 10. But anyway, Shaun, got a couple super chats I want to get to. And actually one super chat to get to real quick from Charlie Weiss's last belt loop. If Brennan Vernon does not make the jump, do you try him at fullback? Also, great coverage by you guys with the pot of gold. Look forward to our Washington success. Brennan Vernon's 6'5", 270 plus pounds. I'm not trying him a fullback.
Fullback, no.
If I'm going to move him, I'm going to move him out to big end. That was where I'd move him.
That's where he should be, in my opinion. But
Agree, but no, I'm not moving him to fullback. Notre Dame doesn't need a fullback. And if there was a defensive player that I was going to move to that type of H-back fullback position, if like let's say that Mike Denbrock was like, look, I'd really, I spent some time this offseason with Kyle Shanahan, and I've seen the value of having a fullback in my offense that can catch the football and block. I'm like, all right, cool. There's a defensive player that I would recruit to play that position. He's where's number 25. His name's Preston Center. It's not Brendan Vernon. And I like Brendan Vernon. This isn't but he's not a fullback. He's just, if you want to move him to offense, move him to tight end or as a blocking tight end or tackle. I'm not moving him to fullback. If you want a defensive player to move to fullback, I think there is one, Charlie, and a good one, and that's Preston Center. Would be my pick to move there. I think he'd be a good one. To be honest with you, if you felt the need for that, like a true fullback, like a blocking fullback that can also catch the football, I think Jack Larson would be another good option for that as well. Is convert him. I think at 6'3", 250, the way he catches the ball and his toughness, I think he'd have a lot better shot at being a great blocker, leading on an ISO block on a Mike linebacker than he is driving a defensive end off the ball. So that's where I would kind of go. Yeah. So anyway, Shaun, that's it for today's show, man. I appreciate you. Great stuff.
Did you get the other
there was actually one. I had two things starred, but the other one was Andre Tonsil's comment about who I thought was the right choice, but I already answered that one earlier in the show. Yeah. So it's funny, of all the things we talked about, that coaching segment was the one that lasted the longest. That was our longest segment of the show. So that was a lot of fun, Shaun. I really enjoyed doing that. We'll have some other debates like that or some other lists like that at some point in time later this year. We're going to talk about who our top 10 quarterbacks are and top offenses and things like that. Trev and I will do some of that stuff as well. So that was a lot of fun, Shaun. I appreciate you coming on today. Appreciate you being part of the RTCF show. We'll be back next Monday. Of course, Shaun and I will be back next Monday. We are going to be live again tomorrow. Trev will be back. He's a little better. He talked to him earlier today. He was in the show, as you guys saw. Trev's feeling a lot better. He got sick. I think, overworked him maybe a little bit the week I was out on vacation, Shaun. He got a little sick this week. Somebody on the board yesterday put a thing about, like, where's Trevor been? And I called Trevor this morning. And I said, I've almost put something like, hey, I can't have a dude outshining me. So I fired him. I can't have a guy making me look like he don't need me. So I fired him. But I didn't want Trevor to read that and be like, hold on a second. What's going on here? So, but no, he did a great job. But he's been under the weather all week. Feeling a lot better today. He could have been on the show if it wasn't RTCF or if one of us needed him to cover. But he will be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So we'll get Trev back. And you guys both did a great job while I was out, by the way, which I greatly appreciate. So anyway, we're going to be back.
If I could say something quickly.
Yeah, go for it.
Everybody, IB Nation, thank you for all the support. The guys been giving to everyone that's been giving support and love to my beautiful daughter. You might want to watch The Voice tonight. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Let's go. Are you going to be in this one? Or is that only the last one?
It's possible.
Possible. Okay.
It's possible. A little B-roll might feature your
see you doing this. This is what I like. Okay. Yeah, love it. Definitely check out The Voice tonight so you can see Shaun's daughter. Just beautiful, beautiful voice. She did Brandy, right? She did I Want to Be Down was what she sang in the first one, correct?
Yeah.
All right, Shaun. Well, great stuff. I hope everybody gets a chance to watch that. For Shaun, I'm Bryan. Have an awesome rest of your day, everybody, and we'll talk to you all again here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.